Rosalind never imagined that one humiliating text message would destroy everything she knew about safety, loyalty, and love. The moment she accidentally told Alessandro Valenti, Boston's most dangerous mafia boss, that he was obscenely hot, her carefully rebuilt life shattered. What started as mortifying embarrassment ignited into forbidden desire, protective obsession, and a love so intense it tore apart the one friendship she couldn't afford to lose. When her violent ex returned to destroy her, Alessandro's darkness became her shield. But choosing him meant betraying her best friend, risking everything, and stepping into a world where love could get you killed. If you want to see where this story goes, stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far Rose's journey travels. Rosalind had learned to make herself invisible. It was a survival skill she'd perfected over 2 brutal years with Marcus Chen, a man whose love had felt like suffocation wrapped in expensive gifts and whispered threats. 6 months ago, she'd finally escaped. Therapy twice a week, a restraining order that felt as flimsy as paper, a new apartment in Cambridge with 3 deadbolts and a neighbor who checked on her too often, kindly invasive in a way that made Rose want to cry with gratitude. Tonight, standing in the gold-drenched ballroom of Boston's Fairmont Copley Plaza, Rose felt like she was breathing underwater. The charity gala was Leo's idea, Leonardo Valenti, her best friend since culinary school, the kind of friend who showed up at 3 in the morning with Thai food and terrible movies when the nightmares got too loud. His family was hosting the event, something about children's hospitals and tax-deductible generosity. Rose had tried to refuse, but Leo had those puppy dog eyes that made refusing him physically impossible. "You need to get out more," he'd insisted, adjusting her dress straps with the critical eye of someone who'd grown up around tailored suits and designer everything. "You can't hide in your apartment forever, Rosie. Marcus doesn't get to keep stealing your life." So here she was, clutching a glass of champagne she hadn't touched, wearing a deep emerald dress Leo had picked out because it makes your eyes look like they have secrets. The dress was beautiful, expensive, and made her feel like an imposter. Around her, Boston's elite mingled with the comfortable arrogance of people who'd never worried about rent or restraining orders. "Stop looking like you're about to bolt," Leo murmured, appearing at her elbow with 2 fresh champagne flutes. He handed her one, his Mediterranean features, all sharp angles and easy charm, creased with gentle amusement. "You're allowed to have fun, you know. It's not illegal." "It feels illegal," Rose admitted, scanning the crowd with the nervous energy of a prey animal in an open field. "Everyone here looks like they own countries." "Some of them probably do." Leo's grin was wicked. "But you're Rose Lynn, future restaurateur, creator of the best carbonara in Boston, and the only person I know who can make a soufflé rise through sheer force of will. You belong here as much as anyone." Rose managed a smile, though her stomach was still twisted in knots. She'd been working as a private chef and caterer since leaving Marcus, slowly rebuilding the confidence he'd systematically destroyed. Her dream, owning her own restaurant, a small, intimate place where food was art and comfort combined, felt impossibly distant. Dreams required courage, and Marcus had taken most of hers. "There's my father," Leo said suddenly, his tone shifting into something complicated. Pride and frustration and a dozen other emotions Rose had learned to recognize over 3 years of friendship. "Try not to stare, he has that effect on people." Rose turned, following Leo's gaze across the ballroom, and forgot how to breathe. Alessandro Valenti moved through the crowd like a shark through water, effortless, commanding, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with the immaculate black tuxedo that probably cost more than her car. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through dark hair that should have made him look distinguished, and instead made him look like trouble wrapped in Italian silk. His face was all harsh angles and sharp intelligence, the kind of masculine beauty that didn't ask for attention because it simply took it. But it was his eyes that stopped Rose's heart. Dark, assessing, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much and forgotten nothing. They swept the room with the casual authority of ownership, and when they landed on Leo, something almost human flickered across that hard face. "He's intense," Rose managed, realizing too late that she'd been staring. "That's one word for it." Leo's voice held affection and exasperation in equal measure. "Alessandro Valenti, businessman, philanthropist, and professional intimidator of anyone stupid enough to cross him. He's brilliant, terrifying, and has exactly zero patience for small talk. Also, he thinks I'm wasting my potential working in restaurants instead of joining the family business. What business? Rose asked, though something in Leo's tone suggested she didn't really want to know. Imports, exports, investments. Leo's answer was smooth, practiced. Boring corporate stuff. Nothing you need to worry about. But Rose had grown up in Boston. She'd heard the Valenti name whispered in certain circles, always with respect edged in fear. The family had money that went back generations, influence that reached into City Hall and beyond, and a reputation for handling problems with swift, permanent efficiency. Alessandro Valenti wasn't just a businessman, he was dangerous. Come on, Leo said, grabbing her hand. I should introduce you before he starts interrogating me about quarterly projections or whatever he's obsessed with this week. Rose's heart hammered against her ribs as they crossed the ballroom. This was a terrible idea. She didn't belong in this world of power and silk and barely concealed violence. She belonged in kitchens, creating beauty out of simple ingredients, hiding behind the safety of preparation and precision. But Leo was already pulling her forward, and Alessandro was turning toward them with the kind of focused attention that made Rose's survival instincts scream. Father, Leo said, his voice carrying forced casualness. This is Rose Lynn, the chef I've been telling you about. Alessandro's gaze shifted to Rose, and she felt the impact like a physical touch. He studied her with unsettling intensity, those dark eyes cataloging every detail, her nervous posture, the way her fingers tightened on the champagne flute, the pulse beating too fast in her throat. Miss Lynn. His voice was deep, rough-edged, carrying the faint melody of Italian vowels. Leonardo speaks highly of your talent. Rose's mouth was completely dry. He exaggerates. One dark eyebrow lifted, a gesture that somehow conveyed amusement and skepticism simultaneously. My son rarely exaggerates about food. It's one of the few areas where his judgment is sound. Hey, Leo protested, but there was warmth beneath the complaint. Alessandro ignored him, still studying Rose with that unnerving focus. You're nervous. It wasn't a question. Rose felt heat crawl up her neck, hating that he could read her so easily. Big crowds, she managed. Not really my thing. Then why are you here? The question should have been rude, but somehow it wasn't. It was direct, curious, cutting through social niceties to something real. Because Leo's stubborn, Rose said before she could stop herself. And I'm apparently terrible at saying no to him. Alessandro's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. A common problem. They talked for a few more minutes, Alessandro's questions intelligent and oddly personal, cutting past surface pleasantries to things that mattered. He asked about her cooking philosophy, her training, her goals. Leo watched the exchange with barely concealed surprise, as if his father showing genuine interest in someone was unusual enough to be noteworthy. Rose found herself relaxing despite her better judgment. Alessandro was intimidating, yes, but there was intelligence in his eyes, a sharp mind that appreciated precision and passion. When she described her dream restaurant, his attention sharpened. Ambitious, he said quietly, but ambition without capital is just fantasy. The words should have stung, but they were true. Rose had 100 sketches for her dream restaurant, countless menu drafts, a business plan she'd rewritten a dozen times. What she didn't have was money, investors, or the kind of connections that turn dreams into reality. I'll get there, she said, surprised by the defiance in her own voice. Eventually. Alessandro studied her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across his face. I believe you will. Then someone called his name, a well-dressed man with calculating eyes and an oily smile, and Alessandro excused himself with a curt nod. Rose watched him go, her heart still beating too fast for reasons she didn't want to examine. Well, Leo said, staring at her with open amazement, that was unexpected? What? My father just had an actual conversation with you. A real one. He usually treats my friends like furniture, polite acknowledgement, zero engagement. I think he actually likes you. Rose took a long drink of champagne, trying to process the strange encounter. He's intense. That's the Valenti family motto, Leo said with a grin. Intense, intimidating, and impossibly stubborn. Welcome to my world. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Rose smiled, nodded, and tried not to think about the way Alessandro's dark eyes had studied her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. By 11 o'clock, her feet ached, her face hurt from forced smiles, and she desperately needed to escape. "I'm heading out," she told Leo, who was deep in conversation with a pretty blonde who kept touching his arm. "Thank you for dragging me here. It was educational." Leo kissed her cheek, already distracted. "Text me when you get home safe." Rose made her escape, grateful for the cool October air that hit her face as she stepped outside. The valet brought her car, a 10-year-old Honda that looked pathetic among the Maseratis and Teslas, and she slid into the driver's seat with a sigh of relief. Her phone buzzed. A text from Leo. "Did you survive?" Rose smiled, typing quickly. "Barely. Your father is obscenely hot, and it's deeply unfair. Also terrifying, mostly terrifying, but the hot part is distracting." She hit send, tossed her phone in the passenger seat, and started the engine. It took approximately 15 seconds for her brain to catch up with what she'd just done. Rose's blood turned to ice. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, pulling up her messages with mounting horror. The text hadn't gone to Leo. It had gone to Alessandro Valenti. "No," she whispered, staring at the screen like it had personally betrayed her. "No, no, no, no!" Her phone buzzed again. A new message, this one from the man whose number she'd accidentally saved when Leo had put it in her contacts for emergencies. "Obscenely hot? I'll accept the compliment, though I should warn you, I'm much more distracting up close." Rose's face burned with mortification so complete she wanted to melt into the car seat and disappear. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. She was going to wake up any second and discover this entire humiliating evening had been a stress dream. Her phone rang. Alessandro's name lit up the screen. Rose stared at it, paralyzed between terror and disbelief. What kind of person called after receiving an accidental thirst text? A normal person would ignore it, pretend it never happened, spare everyone the embarrassment. But Alessandro Valenti wasn't normal. Her finger moved before her brain could stop it, accepting the call. "Miss Lynn." His voice was dark honey, laced with amusement that made her want to die. "I believe you sent me something by mistake." "I am so sorry," Rose managed, her voice strangled with humiliation. "That was meant for Leo. Obviously. I didn't mean to. Didn't you?" The question stopped her cold. There was challenge in his tone, something dangerous and interested. Yes. No. Rose pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, wishing the earth would open and swallow her. "Can we please pretend this never happened? Where are you?" The abrupt question threw her. "What?" "Your location, Miss Lynn. Where are you right now?" Rose's survival instinct screamed warnings. "Why?" "Because I'm about to ask you to have a drink with me, and I'd prefer not to chase you across Boston." Her heart stopped. "A drink? Unless you're afraid." His tone carried lazy challenge, the kind designed to provoke. "I promise I don't bite. Usually." Rose should have said no, should have ended the call, blocked his number, and spent the rest of her life avoiding the Valenti family. This was dangerous. Not just because Alessandro was clearly powerful and probably criminal, but because when he spoke, something in her responded with interest that had nothing to do with safety or common sense. "I'm in the parking garage," she heard herself say. "Level 3. Don't move." He ended the call. Rose sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. What was she doing? This was insane. Alessandro Valenti was her best friend's father, potentially a criminal, definitely dangerous, and at least 20 years older than her. Having a drink with him was a catastrophically bad idea. The knock on her window made her jump. Alessandro stood outside her car, hands in his pockets, that almost smile playing at his lips. He'd shed his tuxedo jacket, and his white shirt was open at the collar, revealing the strong column of his throat. Even in the harsh fluorescent lights of the parking garage, he looked like trouble Rose had no business courting. She rolled down the window, heart hammering. That was fast. "I don't like waiting." He studied her through the window, dark eyes holding hers. "Having second thoughts?" "Tenth thoughts, actually." His smile widened, becoming something real and unexpectedly warm. "Good. That means you're smart." Come have a drink with me anyway. Why? Because you called me obscenely hot, and now I'm curious. He opened her car door, a presumption that should have been offensive, but somehow wasn't. And because I think you're more interesting than you want people to know. Rose should have refused, should have driven away, blocked his number, and never thought about this moment again. Instead, she stepped out of the car. Alessandro led her to a black Mercedes that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne, and when he started the engine, classical music filled the space, something Italian and melancholy. Where are we going? Rose asked, her voice smaller than she'd like. Somewhere quiet. He pulled out of the garage with the easy confidence of someone who'd never questioned his right to any space he occupied. Somewhere we can talk without my son's friends taking photos for social media. They drove through Boston's nighttime streets, the city glittering around them like scattered diamonds. Rose tried to regulate her breathing, tried to remember all the reasons this was dangerous, but sitting next to Alessandro felt oddly safe, like being in the eye of a storm, calm, protected, with chaos held at bay by pure force of will. He took her to a speakeasy in the North End, the kind of place with no sign and a door you'd walk past without noticing. Inside it was all dark wood and dim lighting, with a pianist playing something low and sultry. The bartender nodded at Alessandro with the respect of someone who knew exactly who he was. They settled into a corner booth, private and shadowed. Alessandro ordered whiskey neat. Rose asked for wine and tried not to think about how surreal this entire situation was. So, Alessandro said, once their drinks arrived, tell me why Leonardo's best friend is terrified of crowds and looks like she's ready to run at any moment. Rose's breath caught. Direct, too perceptive, cutting straight to vulnerabilities she'd tried to hide. That's a very personal question for a first drink. We're past pleasantries, Miss Lynn. You already told me I'm obscenely hot. We might as well be honest. Heat crawled up Rose's neck, but she met his gaze. Fair point. She took a sip of wine, considering how much to reveal. Alessandro waited with the patience of someone accustomed to getting answers eventually. I got out of a bad relationship 6 months ago, Rose finally said, the words coming easier than expected. The kind where you forget who you were before. Leo helped me remember. Therapy helped more. But crowds still feel dangerous sometimes. Like I'm exposed. Alessandro's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes. Recognition, maybe, or anger on her behalf. The man who hurt you, he said quietly. Does he still bother you? Rose's fingers tightened on her wine glass. There's a restraining order. That's not what I asked. She met his gaze, seeing something dangerous and protective in those dark depths. Sometimes, he sends emails from fake accounts. Shows up places he shouldn't be. Never enough to violate the order, but enough to remind me he's watching. Alessandro's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking beneath Olive's skin. His name. Why? Because men who hurt women need to be reminded of consequences. The words were soft, deadly, and completely sincere. Rose should have been frightened. Instead, she felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of fear she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. Marcus Chen, she said, surprised by her own honesty. But you can't. I won't do anything you don't want me to do, Alessandro interrupted, his gaze holding hers. But if he continues to bother you, I want to know. They talked for 2 hours, conversation flowing with unexpected ease. Alessandro asked about her culinary training, her inspiration, her dreams. Rose found herself revealing ambitions she rarely voiced, the restaurant she wanted to build, the community she wanted to feed, the legacy she wanted to create. Alessandro listened with focused intensity, asking intelligent questions, pushing her to articulate visions she'd kept vague and safe. You're afraid of wanting things, he observed near midnight. Why? Rose stared into her wine glass, watching light refract through red liquid. Because I wanted things with Marcus, a future, a partnership, respect. And he turned all of it into weapons. It's safer to want small things, achievable things. That's not safety, Alessandro said quietly. That's surrender. The words hit harder than they should have. Rose looked up, meeting his gaze. And you never surrender? Never. His certainty was absolute, unshakable. Life is too short and too brutal to settle for less than what sets your soul on fire. Even when wanting things is dangerous? Alessandro's smile was sharp, dangerous, and entirely too attractive. Especially then. They left the speakeasy near 1 in the morning, stepping into October cold that bit through Rose's thin dress. Before she could shiver, Alessandro shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was old-fashioned, protective, and made her pulse race. "Thank you," she managed, "for the drink, and the conversation, and not making the obscenely hot thing more mortifying than it already was." Alessandro stepped closer, close enough that Rose had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He was tall, broad, radiating heat and danger, and something that made her breath catch. "For the record," he said quietly, his voice rough silk in the darkness, "the feeling is entirely mutual." Rose's heart stopped. "What? You think I didn't notice you the moment you walked into that ballroom?" Alessandro's hand came up, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "You think I have 2-hour conversations with everyone who accidentally texts me?" Rose couldn't form words, couldn't think past the way he was looking at her, dark eyes holding secrets and promises. "This is complicated," Alessandro continued, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. "You're Leonardo's best friend. You're young. You're rebuilding your life. I should walk away right now and forget this night happened." "Should you?" Rose's voice came out breathless. "Yes," he smiled, slow and dangerous. "But I've never been particularly good at doing what I should." He kissed her. Not soft, not tentative. A claiming kiss that stole her breath and set her blood on fire. His hand cupped the back of her neck, holding her steady as he took her mouth with devastating skill. Rose made a sound she'd never heard herself make, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer even as her brain screamed warnings. When Alessandro finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "That was a terrible idea," Rose whispered. "Absolutely." He pressed his forehead to hers, dark eyes holding her captive. "Are you going to let me do it again?" Rose should have said no, should have run, protected herself, chosen safety over this dangerous attraction. Instead, she kissed him back. They stood in that dark Boston street, the city sleeping around them, kissing like teenagers and disaster waiting to happen. Alessandro's hands were gentle and possessive, holding her like she was precious and breakable in his. Rose forgot about fear, forgot about consequences, forgot everything except the way he made her feel, wanted, protected, alive. When they finally broke apart, Alessandro kept her close, his voice rough. "I'm going to drive you home, and then I'm going to get your number, and tomorrow I'm going to call you and ask you to dinner." "What about Leo?" Rose managed. Alessandro's expression darkened. "What about him?" "He's my best friend. And your son. We can't." "We can." Alessandro's certainty was absolute. "And we will. But carefully. Until we're sure this is more than one perfect night." He drove her back to her car, then followed her home to make sure she arrived safely. Before she got out, he programmed his real number into her phone. "Text me when you're inside," he ordered, with all 3 deadbolts locked. But Rose wanted to ask how he knew about the deadbolts, but she suspected she knew the answer. Alessandro Valenti made it his business to know things. She watched him drive away, then climbed the stairs to her apartment in a daze. Inside, she locked all 3 deadbolts, changed into pajamas, and stared at her phone for 10 full minutes before texting. "Home safe, all deadbolts engaged." This was insane. His response came immediately. "Insanity suits you. Sleep well, Rose." Rose fell into bed, Alessandro's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders, smelling like expensive cologne and dangerous promises. She didn't sleep at all. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out how to tell her best friend that she'd kissed his father. Tomorrow she'd have to face the consequences of wanting something, someone, who could destroy the fragile peace she'd built. But tonight, lying in the darkness with her heart still racing, Rose let herself feel something she'd thought Marcus had killed forever. Hope and hunger, and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to want dangerous, complicated, impossible things. Even if they came wrapped in Italian suits and dark eyes that saw straight through her carefully constructed walls. Especially then. Alessandro called at exactly 9 the next morning. Rose stared at her phone, heart hammering against her ribs as his name lit up the screen. She'd barely slept, replaying every moment of the previous night, the kiss, the confession, the way his hands had held her like she was something precious. Now, in the harsh light of day, reality crashed back with brutal clarity. She'd kissed her best friend's father. She was falling for a man who was almost certainly a criminal. And she wanted to answer that call more than she wanted her next breath. Rose hit accept before courage could abandon her. "Did you sleep?" Alessandro's voice was rough velvet, intimate in a way that made her skin flush. "No, you?" "Not even a little." She could hear the smile in his voice. "I kept thinking about the way you taste." Heat crawled up Rose's neck, pooling low in her stomach. "That's not fair." "Nothing about this is fair, tesoro." The Italian endearment rolled off his tongue like sin. "Dinner tonight, 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up." Rose gripped the phone tighter, trying to find the strength to be sensible. "Alessandro, we need to talk about everything, I know." His voice softened, losing some of its command. "We'll talk about Leo, about what this means, about all the very good reasons we should stop before we start. But first, let me feed you. Let me prove this is more than chemistry and bad decisions." Rose closed her eyes, warring with herself. The smart choice was obvious. End this now, before anyone got hurt, before she destroyed her friendship with Leo and got tangled up with a dangerous man she barely knew. But standing in her kitchen, wrapped in morning sunlight, Rose realized she was tired of making the smart choice, tired of choosing safety over wanting. Marcus had stolen 2 years of her life through fear and control. She'd escaped, rebuilt, survived. But she hadn't lived. Not really. 7 o'clock, she heard herself say. "But I'm driving myself." Alessandro's low chuckle vibrated through the phone. "Independent. I like that about you." "You don't know enough about me to like anything yet." "Then let me learn." His voice dropped, becoming something darker, more intimate. "Let me learn everything, Rose." He texted her the address after they hung up. A restaurant in the Seaport district she recognized from culinary magazines. The kind of place that required reservations months in advance and served food that was edible art. Rose spent the afternoon in a state of anxious energy, cooking to calm her nerves and changing her outfit 4 times before settling on a simple black dress that felt elegant without trying too hard. At 6:45, her phone rang again. This time, it was Leo. Rose's stomach dropped as guilt crashed through her. She'd been so consumed with Alessandro that she'd barely thought about the consequences, the betrayal, the impossible position she was putting herself in. "Hey," she answered, trying to sound normal. "Emergency," Leo said, his voice strained. "I need your carbonara recipe, right now. Client dinner tomorrow, and I promised them the best pasta in Boston." Rose exhaled relief so sharp it made her dizzy. "The secret is... Wait, why do you sound weird?" Leo's attention sharpened with the terrifying perception of someone who knew her too well. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm just..." Rose scrambled for a plausible lie. "Getting ready to go out." "Out? Like, out? Leo's surprise was almost comical. "With who? Please tell me you're dating again. Please tell me you're not spending another Saturday night testing pie recipes alone." Rose's throat tightened. This was the moment to confess, to tell him the truth before things went too far. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she heard herself say, "Just dinner with someone. It's new. Probably nothing." "Rosie," Leo's voice filled with warm approval. "That's amazing. You deserve this. You deserve someone who treats you like your magic." The words were knives, each one cutting deeper. Rose pressed her free hand against her stomach, fighting nausea. "I'll text you the carbonara recipe," she managed. "I have to finish getting ready." After she hung up, Rose stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were too bright, her cheeks flushed with guilt and anticipation. She looked like a woman on the edge of something dangerous, something that could destroy everything safe she'd built. She went anyway. The restaurant was elegant understatement, exposed brick, soft lighting, tables spaced far enough apart for real privacy. Alessandro was already there, seated at a corner table with sightlines to both entrances. He stood when he saw her, and Rose's breath caught at the picture he made in charcoal gray suit and black shirt, no tie, looking like wealth and danger and every bad decision she'd ever wanted to make. You came, he said quietly, as if he'd genuinely worried she wouldn't. Did you doubt I would? I hoped you wouldn't. Alessandro pulled out her chair with old-world courtesy that should have felt antiquated, but instead felt cherished. The smart choice was staying home. Coming here means you're as reckless as I am. Rose settled into her seat, meeting his dark gaze. Maybe I'm tired of being smart. Something heated in Alessandro's eyes, but before he could respond, their server appeared, a young woman who treated Alessandro with the careful deference of someone who knew exactly who he was. They ordered wine, appetizers Rose couldn't focus on, and then they were alone again in their private corner. Tell me about your restaurant, Alessandro said, skipping pleasantries entirely. The one you're going to build. What does it look like? Rose blinked at the directness. Most people asked polite questions about her catering business, her training, surface things. Alessandro wanted deeper. Small, she said slowly, the vision forming as she spoke. Maybe 30 seats. Intimate, the kind of place where the kitchen is visible, where food is theater but also comfort. I want seasonal menus that change based on what's best, what's fresh. And I want... She hesitated, suddenly self-conscious. What? Alessandro leaned forward, complete attention focused on her. Tell me. A community table, Rose continued, the words coming faster. One night a week where anyone can eat, regardless of whether they can pay. Because food is love and connection, and everyone deserves that. Everyone deserves to feel cared for. Alessandro studied her for a long moment, something unreadable moving across his face. You're not building a restaurant, you're building a sanctuary. The observation was so accurate it made Rose's chest tight. Is that naive? It's beautiful. Alessandro reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. And it's going to happen, Rose. I'll make sure of it. I don't want your money, Rose said quickly, pulling her hand back. I appreciate the gesture, but I need to do this myself. I need to earn it. Instead of looking offended, Alessandro smiled, a real smile that transformed his harsh features into something almost boyish. Then I'll help you earn it. Connections, advice, opportunities. Nothing you don't work for. But I have resources, Rose, and I want to use them to watch you build something extraordinary. Their food arrived, each course a masterpiece of technique and presentation. They talked between bites, conversation flowing from cooking to art to the strange isolation of ambition. Alessandro spoke about building his business empire with the same passion Rose felt about food, revealing glimpses of a younger man who'd fought his way up from nothing. My father was a hard man, Alessandro said quietly, swirling wine in his glass. He believed in power, control, legacy. He taught me the world was divided into predators and prey, and the only choice was which you wanted to be. And you chose predator, Rose said softly. I chose survival. Alessandro's gaze held hers, dark and unflinching. I chose to build something that couldn't be taken away. I chose to be the man people feared instead of the boy who got crushed. Rose heard the echo of her own survival in his words, the way trauma shaped choices, the way pain built walls. What would you have chosen if you weren't afraid? The question clearly surprised him. Alessandro set down his wine glass, studying her with new intensity. No one's ever asked me that. I'm asking now. Music, he said finally, the admission seeming to cost him something. I wanted to be a pianist, concert halls and compositions and creating beauty instead of... He stopped, jaw tightening. Instead of what? Rose pressed gently. Instead of managing an empire built on things I can't talk about over dinner. Alessandro's smile was sharp, self-mocking. You're dangerous, Rose Lynn. You make me want to tell you truths I've spent decades hiding. Maybe you're tired of hiding. Maybe. He reached across the table again, this time capturing her hand before she could retreat. Or maybe you make honesty feel less like weakness. His thumb traced circles on her palm, the simple touch sending electricity up her arm. Rose knew she should pull away, maintain distance, protect herself. Instead, she laced their fingers together. Tell me about Leonardo, Alessandro said quietly. How you became friends, why you're so loyal to him. Rose tensed, the reminder of her betrayal crashing back. We met at culinary school. He was this confident, charismatic person who should have been intimidating, but instead was just kind. When Marcus, when things got bad, Leo was the one who showed up, who helped me pack my apartment at 3 in the morning, who sat with me through panic attacks and never once made me feel broken. He loves you, Alessandro observed. As a friend, Rose said quickly. Leo and we're not like that. We never have been. I know. Alessandro's certainty was absolute. My son falls in love easily and often, usually with people who appreciate his charm more than his substance. You're different. You see him clearly and love him anyway. That's rare. He's going to hate us, Rose whispered, voicing the fear that had been growing all evening. When he finds out, he's going to feel betrayed by both of us. Alessandro's expression hardened, determination replacing warmth. Then we'll deal with his anger, together. But I'm not walking away from this, Rose. I'm not walking away from you. You don't even know me. I know enough. He stood abruptly, still holding her hand, and pulled her up with him. Come with me. Where? Somewhere we can talk without servers interrupting every 5 minutes. Alessandro threw cash on the table, far more than the bill required, and led Rose out of the restaurant. His Mercedes was waiting with the valet, and within minutes they were driving through Boston's nighttime streets. Where are we going? Rose asked again, heart hammering. My place. Alessandro glanced at her, reading the tension in her posture. Just to talk, Tesoro. I want to show you something. But if you're uncomfortable, I'll take you back to your car right now. Rose should have been uncomfortable. Should have demanded he turn around, should have protected herself from the intimacy of entering his private space. But curiosity and something deeper, trust she had no logical reason to feel, kept her silent. They drove to Beacon Hill, where old money lived behind brick facades and iron gates. Alessandro's building was understated elegance, the kind of place where doormen wore suits and knew better than to ask questions. He led Rose through a lobby of marble and old-world charm, then into an elevator that required a key to access the penthouse. The doors opened directly into his apartment. Rose stepped into a space that stole her breath, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, hardwood floors covered in Persian rugs, furniture that managed to be both expensive and comfortable. But what caught her attention was the piano, a Steinway grand, black and gleaming, positioned near the windows like an altar. You still play? Rose said softly. Alessandro moved to the piano, his fingers trailing over the keys without pressing down. When I can't sleep, when the weight of everything I've built becomes too heavy, music is the only thing that still feels clean. Rose crossed to him, drawn by the vulnerability in his voice. Play something for me. Rose, please. Alessandro studied her for a long moment, then sat at the bench. His hands hovered over the keys for several heartbeats before descending, and suddenly the apartment filled with music, something Italian and heartbreaking, melody and minor chords that spoke of longing and loss and beauty, too painful to bear. Rose watched his hands move across the keys with the same precision and passion she brought to cooking, watched his face soften into something unguarded and achingly human. This wasn't the dangerous businessman or the intimidating mafia boss. This was just Alessandro creating beauty because he had to, because music was the language of everything he couldn't say. When the last notes faded, silence filled the space like a held breath. That was Ludovico Einaudi, Alessandro said quietly, still staring at the keys. I saw him perform in Milan when I was 17. It was the night I decided music would save me or destroy me. What happened? My father found out I'd skipped a business meeting to attend the concert. He took the decision out of my hands. Rose's heart twisted at the carefully neutral words that hid so much pain. She moved closer, standing beside the bench. I'm sorry. Don't be. Alessandro looked up at her, dark eyes holding ghosts. That night taught me everything about power and choice, about what happens when you want something you're not allowed to have. The parallel wasn't subtle. Rose felt it land between them, heavy with meaning. Is that what I am? She asked softly. Something you're not allowed to have? Alessandro stood, the movement bringing him close enough that Rose had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. You're something I shouldn't want, shouldn't pursue, shouldn't risk everything I've built to claim. But I want you anyway. His hand came up, cupping her face with devastating gentleness. I want you with a hunger that terrifies me, and I'm too old and too selfish to walk away just because it's complicated. Rose's breath caught. What are we doing, Alessandro? Something reckless. He leaned down, his forehead touching hers. Something that might destroy us both. But for the first time in 30 years, I don't care about consequences. I only care about you. Rose knew she should run, should protect her heart and her friendship and the fragile peace she'd built. But standing in Alessandro's arms, breathing in his scent, feeling his heartbeat against her palms where they pressed against his chest, running felt impossible. Kiss me, she whispered. Alessandro's mouth claimed hers with barely restrained hunger, his hands tangling in her hair as he pulled her closer. Rose gasped against his lips, her body igniting at the contact. This wasn't the controlled kiss from the night before. This was desperation and need and the breaking of every wall they'd both built. Alessandro walked her backward until her legs hit a couch, and they tumbled onto it together, mouths never breaking contact. His hands traced her curves with reverent possession, learning her shape like musicians learned music, by feel and instinct and complete focus. Tell me to stop, Alessandro breathed against her throat, his teeth grazing her pulse point. Tell me this is too fast and I'll stop. Rose arched into his touch, her fingers gripping his shoulders. Don't stop. Don't you dare stop. He didn't. They moved together with increasing urgency, clothes becoming obstacles, skin becoming necessity. Alessandro touched her like she was precious and breakable in his, each caress designed to unravel her completely. Rose had never felt so wanted, so thoroughly claimed, so absolutely safe while doing something completely reckless. When they finally came together, it was with gasps and whispered confessions, and the shattering of every defense Rose had carefully maintained. Alessandro held her through it, his voice rough with Italian endearments, his hands gentle, even as his body moved with devastating precision. Afterward, they lay tangled together on his couch, breathing hard, hearts racing in synchronized rhythm. That was a mistake, Rose whispered, though she made no move to leave his arms. Alessandro's chest rumbled with dark laughter. The best mistake I've ever made. Rose tilted her head back to look at him, finding his dark eyes soft with satisfaction and something deeper. We can't tell Leo, not yet, not like this. Alessandro's expression hardened slightly. I won't hide you. I'm not asking you to hide me. I'm asking you to give me time. Rose pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Leo deserves better than finding out his best friend is sleeping with his father because I couldn't control myself around you. You're not the only one who lost control. Alessandro captured her hand, bringing it to his lips. But you're right. We tell him together, when we're sure this is... He stopped, and Rose finished the thought. When we're sure this is real, and not just chemistry and bad timing. It's real, Alessandro said with absolute certainty. But Leonardo needs to see that before he forgives us. They stayed like that for a while, wrapped in each other and the knowledge that consequences were coming. Eventually Rose stirred, reaching for her scattered clothes. I should go home. Stay. Alessandro's arms tightened around her. Stay tonight. Let me wake up with you at least once before reality crashes back. Rose wanted to. Wanted it so badly her chest ached with longing. But she forced herself to pull away, to dress, to rebuild the armor she'd let him strip away. If I stay, we'll never figure out how to do this carefully, she said softly. And careful is the only way this doesn't destroy everything. Alessandro watched her dress with hungry eyes, but didn't argue. He drove her back to her car in silence, heavy with unspoken words. And when they arrived, he kissed her one more time, slow and deep and full of promises. Dinner tomorrow, he said against her lips. And the day after, and every day until Leonardo knows and we can stop sneaking around like teenagers. Rose smiled despite the guilt twisting her stomach. You're very demanding. You have no idea. Alessandro's grin was wicked and warm. Go home, Rose, before I drag you back upstairs and keep you all night. Rose drove home in a daze, her body still humming from his touch, her mind spinning with the magnitude of what she'd just done. She'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Started something that would change everything. And the terrifying part was, she didn't want to take it back. Over the next 2 weeks, Rose and Alessandro fell into a careful rhythm of stolen moments and secret dinners. They met at his apartment, at quiet restaurants outside the city, at a gallery opening where Alessandro introduced her as a chef he was consulting with, not technically a lie, but not the whole truth either. With every conversation, every touch, every late-night phone call that stretched until dawn, Rose fell deeper. Alessandro was brilliant and damaged and unexpectedly tender, a man who'd built an empire on ruthlessness, but treated her like she was made of light. He asked about her dreams and actually listened. He challenged her assumptions and pushed her to want bigger, bolder things. He made her feel brave, but the guilt was growing too. Every time Leo called, every time he mentioned his father in passing, every casual reference to family dinner, Rose felt the weight of her deception like stones in her stomach. She was lying by omission, hiding something that would devastate her best friend, and the longer it continued, the worse the betrayal became. "We have to tell him," Rose said one night, lying in Alessandro's arms after another evening that had started with dinner and ended with them tangled in his sheets. "I can't keep lying to him." Alessandro's hand traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I know. Soon." "When is soon?" "When I'm sure he won't convince you to leave me." Alessandro's voice held rare vulnerability. "When I'm sure we're strong enough to survive his anger." Rose propped herself up on her elbow, studying his face in the dim light. "You really think he could convince me to leave?" "Leonardo is your family, Rose, the person who saved you when you needed saving most. If he asks you to choose—" Alessandro's jaw tightened. "I won't let you go without a fight, but I won't make you choose either." "It won't come to that," Rose said, trying to convince herself as much as him. "Leo loves us both. He'll be hurt and angry, but he'll understand eventually." Alessandro pulled her down for a kiss that tasted like desperation and hope. "You have more faith in my son's capacity for forgiveness than I do." The next day, Leo called with an invitation Rose couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. "Family dinner at my dad's place tomorrow night," Leo said, excitement clear in his voice. "He's actually cooking, which is basically a miracle. You have to come. I need someone there who appreciates good food and can keep me from arguing with him about the restaurant." Rose's blood turned to ice. "I don't think—" "Please, Rosie. My dad's been in this weird good mood lately, and I want to capitalize on it before he goes back to being his usual intense self. Besides, he specifically asked me to invite you. I think you made an impression at the gala." Rose closed her eyes, nausea rising in her throat. She was going to have to sit at Alessandro's table, eat his food, and pretend she hadn't spent the last 2 weeks falling in love with him while lying to her best friend about it. "Okay," she heard herself say. "What time?" That night, Alessandro called, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "Leonardo told you about dinner?" "Yes." Rose paced her apartment, phone pressed to her ear. "We should tell him before, not ambush him at a family dinner." "Agreed." Alessandro exhaled heavily. "Come early tomorrow. We'll tell him together before dinner, no more hiding." Rose's heart hammered against her ribs. "He's going to hate us." "Probably." Alessandro's voice softened. "But we'll survive it, together." The next evening, Rose drove to Alessandro's building with her stomach in knots and her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She was about to destroy her best friend's trust, possibly lose the most important friendship in her life, all because she'd fallen for a man she'd known less than a month. Alessandro met her at the elevator, pulling her into his arms the moment the doors closed. "It's going to be okay," he murmured into her hair. "I promise you, Tesoro, we'll get through this." Rose clung to him, drawing strength from his certainty. When the elevator doors opened, they walked into his apartment hand in hand. Leo was already there, standing at the windows with a glass of wine, and he turned when he heard them enter. His smile died the moment he saw their joined hands. "What?" Leo's gaze moved from Rose to Alessandro and back again, confusion giving way to comprehension, and then to something that looked like betrayal. "No, tell me this isn't what it looks like." Rose's throat closed, words dying before they could form. Alessandro's hand tightened on hers. "Leonardo," Alessandro started, his voice calm and steady. "We need to talk." But Leo was already backing away, his face white with shock and hurt. "How long?" 2 weeks, Rose managed, her voice breaking. "Leo, I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you." 2 weeks? Leo's laugh was harsh, painful. You've been sneaking around behind my back for 2 weeks? Both of you? We were going to tell you tonight, Alessandro said quietly. We wanted to be sure before you destroyed my entire relationship with both of you? Leo's voice cracked, raw emotion breaking through. She's my best friend, Dad. My best friend. And you're supposed to be... He stopped, unable to finish the sentence, and the silence that followed was devastating. Rose stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Leo, please, let me explain. This wasn't planned. We didn't mean for it to happen. But it did happen. Leo's eyes were wet, his hands shaking as he set down his wine glass before he dropped it. You let it happen, both of you. While I talked about how happy I was that you were dating again, how much you deserved someone good, you were sleeping with my father. The words landed like blows. Rose flinched, guilt crushing her chest until she couldn't breathe. I love her, Alessandro said quietly, and the confession made Leo's head snap up. I know that doesn't fix the betrayal. I know it doesn't excuse the lying, but I need you to know this isn't casual for either of us. I love her, Leonardo, and I'm not apologizing for that. Leo stared at his father with something that looked like heartbreak. You love her? Yes. And you? Leo turned to Rose, his voice barely above a whisper. Do you love him? Rose met her best friend's eyes, saw the pain and betrayal there, and knew there was only one answer that mattered now. The truth. Yes, she whispered. I love him. Leo closed his eyes, a single tear tracking down his cheek. When he opened them again, his expression had shuddered, becoming cold and distant. Then I guess there's nothing left to say. He moved toward the elevator, each step deliberate and final. I need time. I can't look at either of you right now. Leo, wait! Rose started after him, but Alessandro caught her arm. Let him go, he said gently. Give him time to process. The elevator doors closed on Leo's devastated face, and Rose collapsed against Alessandro, sobs tearing from her throat. I just lost him, she gasped between tears. I lost my best friend. Alessandro held her while she broke apart, his own voice rough with emotion. No, you didn't lose him. He's hurt and angry, but he's not gone. We'll fix this, Rose. We'll make it right. But as Rose cried in Alessandro's arms, she wasn't sure anything could be fixed. She'd chosen love over loyalty, passion over friendship, and the cost was higher than she'd imagined. Outside, night fell over Boston, and somewhere in the city, Leo was learning what betrayal felt like when it came from the people you trusted most. And Rose could only hope that eventually, somehow, he might learn to forgive them. The days following Leo's discovery passed in a fog of grief and determination. Rose threw herself into work with manic energy, accepting every catering job offered, working 16-hour days in kitchens that weren't hers, creating beauty out of butter and flour because it was the only thing that still made sense. But the exhaustion couldn't erase the hollowness in her chest where her best friend used to live. Leo's silence was deafening. No returned calls, no answered texts, nothing but the cold absence where warmth and laughter had been. Rose sent him messages anyway, pouring out apologies and explanations he never acknowledged. Each unanswered text felt like another nail in the coffin of their friendship. Alessandro handled Leo's rejection differently. He grew quieter, more intense, the darkness that usually hovered at his edges becoming more pronounced. Rose caught him staring out windows at nothing, his expression carved from stone, and knew he was grieving too. Losing Leo hurt them both, but for Alessandro it carried the additional weight of paternal failure and the knowledge that his happiness had cost his son something precious. He'll come around, Alessandro said one night, though his voice lacked conviction. They were in his apartment, Rose tucked against his side on the couch, both of them pretending the silence wasn't killing them. Leonardo feels everything intensely, but he's not cruel. He won't cut us out forever. Rose wanted to believe him. She pressed closer, breathing in Alessandro's scent, drawing comfort from his solid presence. What if he does? What if we destroyed something that can't be fixed? Alessandro's arms tightened around her. Then we live with the consequences. Together. I won't lose you, Rose, not even for my son. The words should have been romantic, but they landed heavy with the weight of sacrifice and stubborn determination. Rose wondered if love was always this complicated, this painful, this full of impossible choices where someone always ended up hurt. 3 days after the disastrous dinner that never happened, Rose was catering a corporate event at the Boston Harbor Hotel when her past came crashing back with vicious timing. She was plating appetizers in the kitchen, focused on presentation and timing, when one of the servers came back looking pale and nervous. Rose? There's someone asking for you. Says he's your boyfriend." Rose's blood turned to ice. She had exactly one ex-boyfriend, and he wasn't supposed to be anywhere near her. "Tell him I'm busy," she managed, her hand starting to shake. "Tell him to leave." But Marcus Chen had never been good at taking no for an answer. He appeared in the kitchen doorway moments later, handsome and smiling and radiating the charming menace that had taken Rose far too long to recognize as danger. He'd always been beautiful in that calculated way. Designer clothes, perfect hair, the kind of smile that made you feel special right up until you realized it was a weapon. "Rose," his voice was warm, honey, laced with poison. "You look incredible. I've missed you." Rose's hands were shaking so badly she had to set down the knife before she dropped it. Around her, the kitchen staff had gone quiet, tension crackling through the air like static electricity. "You need to leave," Rose said, proud that her voice only trembled slightly. "Now, or I'm calling the police." Marcus's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. "Come on, baby. Don't be dramatic. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. You owe me that much." "I don't owe you anything." Rose forced herself to stand taller, to meet his gaze even though every instinct screamed to run. "You have a restraining order. Being here violates it. Leave before I make this worse for you." "Worse for me?" Marcus laughed, the sound scraping across Rose's nerves. "You're the one who ran away like a coward. You're the one who destroyed what we had over nothing. I loved you, Rose. I still love you. And you repay me by hiding behind lawyers and paperwork?" Rose's chest tightened, old fear and new fury warring inside her. This was Marcus's gift, making his abuse sound like devotion, his control feel like care, his violence seem like her fault. For 2 years she'd believed him. For 2 years she'd twisted herself into smaller and smaller shapes, trying to avoid his anger. Not anymore. "Your love felt like drowning," Rose said clearly, loudly enough that everyone in the kitchen could hear. "Your love left bruises. Your love made me afraid to breathe. So no, Marcus, I don't want to talk. I want you gone." Marcus's expression darkened, the charming mask slipping to reveal the rage underneath. He took a step into the kitchen, and Rose's survival instincts finally kicked in. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, pulling up Alessandro's contact. Before she could hit call, Marcus lunged forward, grabbing her wrist hard enough to hurt. "You don't get to dismiss me," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "You don't get to move on like I meant nothing, like what we had was nothing." Pain shot up Rose's arm where his fingers dug into bone, but she refused to cry out, refused to give him the satisfaction. Instead, she met his eyes with all the strength therapy and Alessandro and 6 months of freedom had given her. "Let go of me." "Or what?" Marcus's smile was ugly now, all teeth and threat. "You'll call your new boyfriend, the one you've been whoring yourself out to? You think I don't know, Rose? You think I haven't been watching?" The words hit like ice water. Marcus had been following her, watching her, knowing about Alessandro. Before Rose could respond, chaos erupted. One of the kitchen staff, a line cook named Danny, who Rose had worked with before, stepped forward, his voice hard. "Let her go, right now." Marcus's grip tightened, his attention still locked on Rose. "This is between me and my girlfriend. Stay out of it." "I'm not your girlfriend," Rose said through gritted teeth. "I haven't been for 6 months. Let go." What happened next occurred in rapid succession. Danny moved to intervene. Marcus shoved Rose backward, her hip connecting painfully with the counter. Someone shouted. Rose's phone hit the floor, the screen cracking on impact. And then the kitchen doors burst open, and Alessandro Valenti walked in like vengeance personified. Rose had never seen him like this. The businessman, the philanthropist, the cultured man who played piano and spoke in Italian endearments, all of it was gone, stripped away to reveal something primal and terrifying underneath. His dark eyes locked on Marcus's hand still gripping Rose's wrist, and his expression went absolutely murderous. "Get your hands off her." Alessandro's voice was quiet, deadly, carrying the kind of authority that made grown men think twice. "Now." Marcus released Rose immediately, self-preservation overriding arrogance, but he tried to recover, puffing up with false bravado. "Who the hell are you?" Alessandro ignored him completely, crossing to Rose in 3 long strides. His hands were gentle as they cupped her face, his eyes scanning her for injuries with focused intensity. "Did he hurt you?" Alessandro asked softly, though nothing about his tone was soft. "Tesoro, did he hurt you?" Rose's throat was too tight to speak. She nodded, holding up her wrist where Marcus's fingers had left red marks already darkening to bruises. Something flickered across Alessandro's face, rage so pure and cold it made Rose's breath catch. He pressed a careful kiss to her forehead, then turned to face Marcus with lethal calm. "You have exactly 10 seconds to walk out of this building," Alessandro said, each word precise as a blade. "After that, what happens to you won't be a legal matter. It will be a personal one." Marcus tried to laugh, but it came out strangled. "You're threatening me? Do you know who my family is? Do you know what kind of lawyers we have?" "I know exactly who your family is." Alessandro took a single step forward, and Marcus instinctively retreated. "The Chen family has shipping interests that rely heavily on port access controlled by people who owe me favors. Your father's real estate developments require permits that pass through boards I influence. Your cousin's medical practice operates in hospitals where my donations fund entire wings." With each word, Alessandro advanced, and Marcus backed away, his face going progressively paler. "So when I tell you that harassing Rose Lynn again will result in consequences your family's lawyers can't fix, I want you to understand precisely what that means." Alessandro's voice dropped even lower, becoming something that barely qualified as human. "Touch her again, speak to her again, even think about her again, and I will dismantle everything your family has built, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, until there's nothing left but ruins and the memory of what happens when you threaten something that belongs to me." The kitchen had gone absolutely silent. Even the industrial fans seemed to have stopped humming, the entire world holding its breath. Marcus stumbled backward, his bravado completely shattered. "You can't. You're insane." "I'm protective." Alessandro's smile was all teeth and zero warmth. "Now get out. And if you're smart, you'll convince your lawyers that dropping the appeal on the restraining order is in everyone's best interest." Marcus fled. Actually turned and ran, nearly tripping over his own feet in his rush to escape. The kitchen doors swung shut behind him, and the spell broke. Staff members exhaled collectively, returning to work with the studied determination of people pretending they hadn't just witnessed something that would make an excellent story later. Alessandro turned back to Rose, and the terrifying predator disappeared, replaced by concern so naked it made her chest ache. "Let me see your wrist," he said gently, already reaching for her hand. Rose let him examine the bruises, watched his jaw tighten with barely restrained fury as he catalogued the damage. His touch was feather-light, reverent, as if she might shatter. "I'm calling my doctor," Alessandro said firmly, "and then we're filing a police report. Marcus just violated his restraining order in front of a dozen witnesses." Alessandro, no arguments rose. His eyes met hers, dark and implacable. "He put his hands on you. He hurt you. That doesn't get ignored or forgiven. That gets consequences." Rose wanted to argue that she could handle it herself, that she didn't need him fighting her battles. But the truth was, she was shaking, adrenaline and old trauma making her knees weak. Having Alessandro there, solid and furious and unshakably on her side, felt like the only thing keeping her upright. "How did you know?" she managed. "How did you know to come?" Alessandro pulled out his phone, showing her the screen, a text from an unknown number. "Your girl's in trouble. Harbor Hotel kitchen. Come now." "I don't know who sent it," Alessandro admitted, "but I got here as fast as I could." Rose looked around the kitchen, catching Danny's eye. The line cook gave her a small nod before turning back to his station, and Rose understood. Someone had been looking out for her. Someone had known exactly who to call. Alessandro drove her home after the police had taken statements and Marcus had been officially arrested for violating the restraining order. Rose sat in the passenger seat of his Mercedes, wrapped in his jacket, watching Boston blur past the windows. "Stay with me tonight," Alessandro said quietly. "I don't want you alone after this." Rose should have argued, should have insisted she was fine, that she could take care of herself, that she didn't need protection. But the truth was she felt hollowed out and shaky, and the thought of being alone in her apartment with 3 deadbolts that suddenly didn't feel like enough made her want to cry. "Okay," she whispered. Alessandro's apartment felt like a sanctuary after the chaos of the evening. He settled Rose on the couch with wine and blankets, then disappeared into his bedroom. When he returned, he was carrying a first aid kit and moving with the careful efficiency of someone who'd treated injuries before. "This will help with the bruising," he said softly, applying arnica gel to her wrist with gentle fingers. "And I want you to ice it for 20 minutes before bed." Rose watched him work, this dangerous man being so careful with her broken pieces. "You scared me tonight." Alessandro's hand stilled. "I scared you?" "The way you looked at Marcus. The way you threatened him." Rose swallowed hard. "I've never seen you like that. So cold, so willing to destroy someone." Alessandro set down the arnica gel, his expression unreadable. "Does that change how you see me?" "I don't know," Rose admitted honestly. "Part of me was terrified. Part of me felt safer than I've ever felt. And part of me wonders what kind of person you have to be to make threats like that and mean every word." Alessandro was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes holding hers. "I'm not a good man, Rose. I've done things I can't take back, made choices that haunt me. The business I run, the empire I've built, it's not all clean. It's not all legal. And the power I have, the threats I make, they're real." Rose's heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't look away. "Are you dangerous?" "Yes." No hesitation, no apology. "But never to you. Never to the people I love. My darkness exists to protect what's mine, Rose. And you're mine now, whether that terrifies you or not." The possessiveness in his voice should have triggered every warning bell Marcus had installed in her psyche. Should have made her run, protect herself, choose safety over this complicated, dangerous man. Instead, Rose leaned forward and kissed him. Alessandro made a sound low in his throat, his hands coming up to frame her face as he deepened the kiss. There was desperation in it, need and claim, and the acknowledgement that they'd crossed another line tonight, exposed another truth they couldn't take back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rose pressed her forehead to his. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. "I should be. Maybe I'm broken or reckless or just tired of being scared. But when Marcus grabbed me, when I saw you walk through those doors, I wasn't afraid. I was relieved. Because I knew you'd protect me. I knew you'd make it stop." Alessandro's hands trembled slightly against her skin, revealing emotion he rarely showed. "You're not broken, Tesoro. You're brave. Braver than I've ever been. You survived abuse and chose to heal instead of becoming hard. You let yourself feel again, trust again, even after someone taught you that trust was dangerous. That's not broken. That's extraordinary." Rose kissed him again, slower this time, tasting promise and possession and something that felt terrifyingly like forever. Alessandro lifted her easily, carrying her to his bedroom without breaking contact, and they spent the night learning each other again, this time with the knowledge that what they had was real, dangerous, and worth fighting for. The next morning, Rose woke to Alessandro already dressed, standing by the window with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, controlled, speaking in rapid Italian. She caught enough to understand he was giving orders, making arrangements, ensuring consequences for someone who'd made a mistake. When he noticed she was awake, Alessandro ended the call and crossed to the bed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Marcus Chen is withdrawing his appeal and accepting a permanent restraining order," he said quietly. "His family's lawyers are very motivated to resolve this quickly and quietly." Rose should have asked how he'd accomplished that overnight, should have questioned the methods, the pressure, the likely threats involved. Instead, she just felt grateful. "Thank you." Alessandro's expression softened. "Always. Anyone who hurts you answers to me, Rose. That's not negotiable." They had breakfast together, Alessandro making coffee while Rose attempted pancakes in his pristine kitchen, It felt domestic and normal and achingly right, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. Rose found herself imagining mornings like this stretching into the future, the two of them navigating life together, building something real. But the shadow of Leo's absence hung over everything, a constant reminder of what their happiness had cost. I need to try talking to him again, Rose said as she flipped pancakes. Leo deserves better than radio silence from both of us. Alessandro leaned against the counter, watching her work. He won't answer. Maybe not, but I have to try. Rose plated the pancakes, drowning them in maple syrup the way Leo always did. He's your son, Alessandro, and he's my best friend. We can't just give up on him. I don't want to give up on him. Alessandro's voice was rough with emotion he rarely showed. But I also won't give up on you. And if Leonardo forces me to choose, he won't. Rose crossed to him, syrup-sticky fingers reaching for his hand. He's hurt and angry, but Leo's not cruel. He'll come around. We just have to give him time and space and proof that this is real. Alessandro pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. You have more faith than I do. Then I'll have enough faith for both of us. They spent the rest of the morning in comfortable silence, Alessandro working on his laptop while Rose tested new recipes, both of them existing in the same space with the ease of people who fit together naturally. It was almost possible to forget the complications, the consequences, the fact that the two most important relationships in both their lives were fracturing under the weight of their choices. Rose's phone rang just after noon, an unknown number. She answered cautiously, expecting a telemarketer or wrong number. Instead, she heard Leo's voice, rough and strained. Rose, can you meet me? Just you. Not my father. Please. Rose's heart leapt into her throat. Of course. Where? When? Our spot, the North End Bakery, 2:00. He paused, and Rose heard the pain in his silence. I'm not ready to forgive you, but I need to understand. I need to know if I lost my best friend forever, or if there's something left to save. There's something left, Rose said quickly, tears already burning behind her eyes. Leo, I promise you, there's so much left. I never wanted to hurt you. Please believe that. I'll see you at 2. He ended the call before Rose could say anything else. Alessandro looked up from his laptop, reading her expression. Leonardo? He wants to meet. Just me. Rose's hands were shaking with nervous energy. He's willing to talk. That's good. Alessandro's voice was carefully neutral, but Rose saw the flash of hurt in his eyes. His son wanted to see Rose, but not him, and that exclusion cut deep. Rose crossed to him, cupping his face in her hands. He'll talk to you too, eventually, but I'm his friend first. Let me try to repair that bridge. Then we'll work on yours together. Alessandro kissed her palm, his eyes dark with emotion. Don't choose him over us, Rose. I know that's selfish, but I need you to know. I can't lose you. Not even for Leonardo. You won't lose me. Rose kissed him hard, trying to pour certainty into contact. I love you, Alessandro. That doesn't change because Leo's hurt, but I love him too, and I need to try to fix what we broke. She left Alessandro's apartment at 1:30, giving herself time to navigate Boston traffic and prepare for a conversation that could either salvage her most important friendship or destroy it completely. The North End Bakery was their place, a tiny Italian spot where she and Leo had spent countless afternoons eating cannoli and planning their culinary futures. Going there felt significant, like Leo was offering a chance for something familiar and safe. Rose arrived early, claiming their usual table in the corner. The bakery smelled like espresso and sugar and memories, and she felt her throat tighten with the weight of everything she'd risked. Leo walked in at exactly 2:00. He looked terrible, exhausted, hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept in days. But when he saw Rose, something flickered across his face, pain and longing and the ghost of their friendship. They stared at each other for a long moment, and then Leo crossed to the table and sat down, putting careful distance between them. I ordered your usual, Rose said quietly, gesturing to the cappuccino and sfogliatelle already waiting. I hope that's okay. Leo stared at the pastry like it might contain answers. You remembered. Of course I remembered. Leo, I remember everything. Your favorite food, your coffee order, the way you stress bake when you're anxious. You're my best friend. That doesn't just disappear because I made a terrible choice in how I handled this. Leo's jaw tightened. Did you love him when we had dinner that night? When I was happy for you dating again, were you already sleeping with my father? Rose's chest ached at the raw pain in his voice. Yes. I'm so sorry, Leo. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid. Afraid of this exact moment. Afraid of losing you. So you lied instead. Leo's laugh was bitter. You let me congratulate you for moving on while you were sneaking around with my dad. How is that better than just being honest? It's not. Rose forced herself to meet his eyes, to not hide from the hurt she'd caused. It was cowardly and selfish, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. You deserved honesty, Leo. You deserved better from both of us. They sat in painful silence, the weight of betrayal filling the space between them. Finally, Leo spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Do you actually love him? Or is this some kind of trauma response, some messed up attempt to feel protected after Marcus? The question hit like a physical blow, but Rose understood why he'd ask it. She'd asked herself the same thing in her darkest moments of doubt. I love him, she said quietly, certainly. Not because he makes me feel safe, though he does. Not because he's powerful or protective or solving my problems. I love him. Because when I'm with Alessandro, I remember who I wanted to be before Marcus tried to destroy me. I love him because he challenges me and believes in me and sees potential I'd forgotten I had. I love him because he's brilliant and damaged and trying to be better, just like I am. Leo closed his eyes, a single tear tracking down his cheek. He's my father, Rosie. My complicated, distant, intimidating father who I've spent my whole life trying to impress. And now you're the one he opens up to, the one he smiles for, the one who gets the version of him I've always wanted to know. The confession broke Rose's heart. She reached across the table, and after a moment's hesitation, Leo let her take his hand. You haven't lost him, Leo. If anything, loving me has made Alessandro realize how much he's missed with you. He talks about you constantly, how proud he is, how much he admires your courage to choose your own path. He's just terrible at showing it, because he's too busy showing you instead. Leo's voice cracked. I know I'm being selfish. I know you both deserve happiness. But it hurts, Rose. It hurts so much to know that the two people I care about most found each other and didn't think I could handle the truth. Rose squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. I thought I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself. I was afraid of exactly this, seeing you hurt and knowing I caused it. I'm so sorry, Leo. I would take it back if I could. I would tell you the truth from the beginning and deal with the consequences. But I can't change what happened. I can only promise to never lie to you again. Leo studied her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers for something Rose desperately hoped he'd find. Are you happy? He finally asked. With him? Are you genuinely happy? Rose thought about Alessandro's hands on her skin, his voice in the darkness, the way he looked at her like she was the answer to questions he'd stopped asking. She thought about mornings in his kitchen, late nights at the piano, conversations that stretched until dawn. She thought about feeling brave and wanted and whole. Yes, she whispered, I'm happier than I've ever been. Leo nodded slowly, fresh tears spilling over. Then I guess I have to learn to live with that. Does that mean you can forgive us? Eventually? I don't know. Leo pulled his hand back, wrapping both around his untouched cappuccino. I want to, Rosie. I want to get past this and have my best friend back and not feel like my entire family structure just imploded. But every time I think about you two together, I feel sick. I feel betrayed and angry and like I don't know either of you anymore. Rose's heart shattered into smaller pieces, but she forced herself to nod. Then take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. Whether that's next week or next year or never. I'll always be here for you, Leo. You're my family. But he's your future. Leo's smile was sad, resigned, and achingly perceptive. My father's your future, and I'm the complication you both have to navigate around. You're not a complication, you're my best friend. I was your best friend, Leo corrected gently. Now I don't know what I am. They talked for another hour, painful and honest, laying out hurts and fears and hopes for repair. Leo admitted he'd known something was different about Alessandro lately, had seen the way his father smiled more, softened around the edges. Rose confessed how guilty she'd felt, how every lie had compounded until the truth felt impossible. When they finally said goodbye, it wasn't with the easy affection they'd always shared. It was with careful distance and the acknowledgement that their friendship would never be exactly what it was before. But there was possibility too, fragile and uncertain, but real. Rose drove back to Alessandro's apartment with tears drying on her cheeks and hope warring with grief in her chest. She found him at the piano, playing something melancholy and beautiful, his face carved from shadows and regret. He stopped when she entered, standing immediately to pull her into his arms. "How bad?" he asked quietly. "Bad, but not hopeless." Rose pressed her face against his chest, breathing him in. "He's hurt and angry and needs time, but he didn't say never, Alessandro. He didn't cut us out completely." Alessandro held her tighter, his voice rough. "Did he ask about me?" "Not directly, but he's processing. Give him space to be angry at you separately. Let him work through the father-son betrayal on his own timeline." "And if he never forgives me?" The vulnerability in Alessandro's voice made Rose's chest ache. "Then we figure it out together." She pulled back to look at him, cupping his face in her hands. "But I think he will. Leo loves you, Alessandro. He's just learning that you're human, that you make mistakes and choose your own happiness and aren't the untouchable figure he built you up to be." Alessandro kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, soft kisses full of gratitude and love, and the recognition that they'd survived the first real test of their relationship. "I love you," he said against her mouth. "Whatever happens with Leonardo, whatever consequences we face, I need you to know that choosing you was the easiest decision I've ever made." Rose kissed him back, tasting promise and possession, and the dangerous, beautiful truth that sometimes love required sacrifice, pain, and the courage to want something even when wanting it hurt the people you cared about. They'd lost Leo's easy acceptance. They'd sacrificed the simple joy of their relationship for complicated reality. But standing in Alessandro's arms, feeling his heartbeat against hers, Rose knew she'd make the same choice again. Some things were worth fighting for. Some people were worth the pain. And love, real, complicated, dangerous love, was always worth the risk. The weeks that followed Rose's conversation with Leo passed in a strange limbo of progress and pain. Alessandro threw himself into helping Rose build her future, connecting her with investors and real estate agents, reviewing business plans with the same intensity he brought to his own empire. Rose let him help because refusing felt like rejecting the part of him that needed to provide, to protect, to turn his power into something that created beauty instead of fear. They found the perfect space in the South End, a former gallery with exposed brick, high ceilings, and windows that flooded the interior with light. It needed work, significant investment, and a vision Rose had been cultivating for years. Standing in the empty space with Alessandro's hand in hers, Rose could see it all. The open kitchen where diners could watch creation happen. The community table where strangers would become friends. The intimate corners where couples could fall in love over carefully crafted meals. "This is it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "This is where I build my dream." Alessandro pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Then we make it happen, whatever you need, tesoro, whatever it takes." Rose signed the lease 3 days later, her hands shaking as she put pen to paper and committed to something bigger than catering jobs and borrowed kitchens. Alessandro stood beside her, steady and certain, and when the realtor left them alone in the space that was now legally hers, Rose turned to him with tears streaming down her face. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if I've built this dream up so much that reality can't possibly match?" Alessandro cupped her face in his hands, his dark eyes holding hers with absolute conviction. "You won't fail. You're brilliant and talented, and you understand food the way I understand power. Instinctively, completely, with a hunger that won't be satisfied with anything less than extraordinary. This restaurant will be everything you've dreamed and more, because you won't accept anything less." Rose kissed him then, pouring gratitude and love and fear into the contact. Alessandro held her like she was precious, like her dreams mattered as much as his empire, like her success was his success in ways that had nothing to do with money or control. But even in moments of pure joy, Leo's absence haunted them both. Alessandro mentioned him rarely, but Rose caught the way his gaze would drift sometimes, the way he'd pull out his phone as if to call before setting it down again. She knew he was giving Leo space, respecting his son's need for distance, but the cost showed in the lines around Alessandro's eyes and the careful way he avoided certain subjects. Rose tried reaching out to Leo every few days, texts that were casual and non-demanding, photos of the restaurant space taking shape, invitations to coffee he never accepted. Sometimes he responded with brief messages that were polite but distant. More often, he left her on read, and Rose would stare at the screen wondering if she'd destroyed the most important friendship of her life for a love that was still too new to guarantee forever. Then Marcus made his final, catastrophic mistake. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Rose was at the restaurant space meeting with contractors when her phone rang, a Boston number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her accept the call. Rose Lynn? The voice was professional, clipped. This is Detective Sarah Morrison with the Boston Police. We need you to come down to the station. It's regarding Marcus Chen. Rose's blood turned to ice. What happened? Is he violating the restraining order again? It's more serious than that. We'll explain when you get here. How soon can you be at District C6? Rose made it to the station in 20 minutes, her heart hammering against her ribs with every possible scenario playing through her mind. Detective Morrison met her in the lobby, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an expression that gave away nothing. Miss Lin, thank you for coming so quickly. I need to ask you some questions about Marcus Chen and your relationship with him. They settled into an interview room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Rose's hands were shaking as she gripped the table's edge. Marcus violated a federal restraining order 2 weeks ago, Detective Morrison said, opening a file thick with documentation. Since then, he's been under investigation for stalking, harassment, and attempted assault. But this morning, things escalated. He was arrested trying to access your restaurant property with what our officers describe as concerning materials. Rose's mouth went completely dry. What kind of materials? Accelerants? Gasoline specifically, along with detailed photographs of you, your daily schedule, and information about Alessandro Valenti. Detective Morrison's gaze sharpened. Mr. Chen made some alarming statements during his arrest. He claims Mr. Valenti had him threatened, his family's business targeted, and that he was defending himself against criminal intimidation. Rose felt the floor tilt beneath her. Alessandro wouldn't, but even as she said it, she remembered Alessandro's cold fury in the hotel kitchen, the threats he'd made with absolute conviction, the way Marcus had fled like a man who'd seen his own destruction promised. We're not investigating Mr. Valenti at this time, Detective Morrison continued, but we need to understand the full picture of what's been happening. Marcus Chen is claiming he was driven to desperate measures by threats against his family's livelihood. Is there any truth to that claim, Miss Lin? Rose's mind raced, torn between protecting Alessandro and telling the truth. Marcus abused me for 2 years. When I finally escaped, he continued harassing me despite a restraining order. Alessandro, Mr. Valenti? Yes, he made it clear that continuing to bother me would have consequences. But Marcus chose to show up at my workplace, to grab me hard enough to leave bruises, to violate a court order. Whatever happened after that was Marcus's choice, not Alessandro's fault. Detective Morrison studied her for a long moment. You're in a relationship with Mr. Valenti now, correct? Yes. And you don't find it concerning that a man with Mr. Valenti's reputation and resources used his influence to intimidate your ex-boyfriend? Rose met the detective's gaze steadily. I find it concerning that it took someone else's protection to make Marcus stop terrorizing me. I find it concerning that a restraining order wasn't enough. I find it concerning that women have to rely on powerful men to be safe from violent ex-partners because the legal system consistently fails us. Something flickered in Detective Morrison's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or respect. She closed the file, her expression softening slightly. Marcus Chen is being charged with stalking, violation of a restraining order, attempted arson, and several other counts. His bail was denied. He won't be bothering you again, Miss Lin. Rose felt tears burning behind her eyes, relief and delayed terror mixing into something that made her hands shake. Thank you. One more thing. Detective Morrison leaned forward. Alessandro Valenti is a complicated man with a complicated reputation. I don't know the details of your relationship, and frankly, it's none of my business. But be careful, Miss Lynn. Men like him, men with that kind of power, they protect what's theirs with methods that aren't always legal or safe. Make sure you know what you're getting into. The warning followed Rose out of the police station and into the crisp October afternoon. She sat in her car for 10 minutes trying to process everything before calling Alessandro. He answered on the first ring. Rose, what's wrong? Where are you? My office. What happened? You sound... I'm coming to you. Don't go anywhere. She drove to Alessandro's building in the financial district, her mind churning with questions and fears and the complicated reality of loving a man who wielded power like a weapon. His assistant waved her through immediately, and Rose found Alessandro standing at his office windows, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian that sounded like orders. He ended the call the moment he saw her face. Tell me, he demanded, crossing to her in 3 long strides. Rose told him everything. Marcus's arrest, the attempted arson, the detective's warnings about Alessandro's methods. She watched his expression harden with each word, watched the businessman disappear and the dangerous man emerge. He tried to burn down your restaurant, Alessandro said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of cold fury that made Rose's survival instincts wake up. He planned to destroy your dream because I took away his ability to destroy you. Did you? Rose asked directly. Did you threaten his family's business? Use your influence to force them to control him? Alessandro's jaw tightened. Yes. The honest admission hit harder than a lie would have. Rose sank into one of his office chairs, trying to organize her thoughts into something coherent. I called in favors, Alessandro continued, his tone flat and unapologetic. I made it clear to the Chen family that Marcus's behavior was costing them opportunities and goodwill. I didn't threaten violence or illegal action. I simply withdrew support and made strategic recommendations to people who value my opinion. The Chens chose to pressure Marcus because keeping me as an ally was more valuable than indulging his stalking. That's still manipulation, Rose said quietly. That's still using your power to control outcomes. Yes. Alessandro knelt in front of her chair, forcing her to meet his eyes. And I'd do it again without hesitation. Marcus wasn't going to stop, Rose. The restraining order was paper. The police couldn't help until he'd already hurt you. So I used the tools I have, money, influence, strategic pressure, to make sure he understood that hurting you would cost him everything. Rose stared at this man she loved, seeing clearly now what she'd always known on some level. Alessandro Valenti wasn't just a businessman with connections. He was someone who operated in gray areas, who used power without apology, who protected what was his through methods that existed outside normal legal boundaries. I should be afraid of you, Rose whispered. Alessandro's expression cracked, revealing pain underneath the hard exterior. Are you? Rose searched her heart for fear and found only complicated truth. No, I should be, but I'm not. Because everything you did to protect me. Because the power you used to threaten Marcus is the same power you're using to help me build my restaurant. Because I understand now that you're not good or bad, legal or criminal. You're just someone who survives by controlling outcomes and refuses to be helpless. I won't apologize for protecting you, Alessandro said roughly. I won't pretend I regret making Marcus Chen understand consequences. But I need you to decide if you can live with who I am, Rose. If you can accept that the man who makes you feel safe is also the man who makes threats that aren't empty. Rose cupped his face in her hands, her thumb tracing the harsh line of his jaw. I lived with a man who used power to control and diminish me. You use power to protect and empower. That's not the same thing, Alessandro. That's the difference between abuse and devotion. Relief flooded Alessandro's features. He pulled her down to the floor, gathering her into his arms and holding her like she might disappear. They sat there on his expensive office carpet, wrapped around each other, acknowledging the complicated reality of their relationship. Marcus is going to prison, Rose said quietly. Detective Morrison said the charges are serious. Multiple felonies. Good. Alessandro's voice was absolutely certain. And when he gets out, if he's stupid enough to come near you again, I'll make sure the consequences are permanent. Rose should have been horrified by the implicit threat, Instead, she just held him tighter, accepting that Alessandro's love came with edges sharp enough to cut anyone who threatened what he valued. Her phone buzzed with a text. She pulled it out, expecting her contractor or supplier, and instead saw Leo's name. "I heard about Marcus. Are you okay?" Rose's breath caught. It was the first time in weeks that Leo had initiated contact, the first crack in the wall he'd built between them. She showed Alessandro the message, watching hope flicker across his face. "I'm okay. Shaken, but safe. Alessandro was with me when I found out." The response came quickly. Of course he was. "Can we talk?" Actually talk, not just text? Rose's hands shook as she typed back. "Yes. Any time. I miss you. Tomorrow, noon, our bakery." Alessandro read over her shoulder, his expression unreadable. He's reaching out. Maybe Marcus's arrest made him realize life's too short to stay angry. Rose turned in Alessandro's arms, studying his face. "Do you want to come with me? Try talking to him together?" "No." Alessandro's voice was firm but gentle. "This is about your friendship with my son. Let him have that separately from his relationship with me. One bridge at a time, tesoro." That night, wrapped in Alessandro's arms in his bed, Rose let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way through this. That Leo's anger might soften into understanding, that the friendship she'd thought lost might be salvageable, that the family they'd broken might rebuild into something different, but still whole. The next day, Rose arrived at the bakery early, claiming their usual table and ordering Leo's favorites before her courage could fail. When he walked in at exactly noon, he looked better than he had at their last meeting. Less haunted, more present, though still carrying visible hurt. He sat down across from her, staring at the cannoli she'd ordered him. "You're okay?" he asked without preamble. "Marcus didn't hurt you?" "He tried to burn down my restaurant," Rose said honestly. "But the police caught him before he could. He's in jail now, multiple felonies." Leo closed his eyes briefly. "I'm sorry, Rosie. I'm sorry you had to go through that. And I'm sorry I wasn't there for you when it happened." "You were processing your own hurt," Rose said gently. "You don't have to apologize for that." "I kind of do, though." Leo finally met her eyes, and Rose saw exhaustion and resignation there. "Because while I was busy being angry and feeling betrayed, you were dealing with your psycho ex-boyfriend trying to commit arson. And my father was the one protecting you, being there for you, doing what I should have been doing as your best friend." Rose reached across the table, waiting until Leo took her hand. "You are my best friend. That doesn't change because we're in a complicated situation. And you did protect me, Leo. For 6 months after I left Marcus, you were the one who showed up, who helped me heal, who reminded me I was worth saving. Alessandro's just continuing what you started." "He loves you," Leo said quietly. "I've never seen my father like this. Growing up, he was this distant figure, powerful, intimidating, emotionally unavailable. I spent my whole life trying to get his attention, his approval, some sign that I mattered to him. And then you show up and suddenly he's smiling, opening up, being the father I always wanted, but with you instead of me." The pain in Leo's voice made Rose's chest ache. "That's not true, Leo. Alessandro talks about you constantly. He's so proud of you, your courage to choose your own path, your talent, your independence. He just doesn't know how to show it. Because he's too busy showing you instead." Leo's smile was sad but lacking the bitterness from before. "I know I'm being selfish. I know you both deserve happiness, but it's hard to watch my father be vulnerable and open with my best friend when he spent my entire childhood being a closed book." "Then talk to him," Rose urged. "Tell him what you just told me. Give him a chance to explain why he's the way he is. Alessandro's not good at emotions or vulnerability, but he's trying, Leo. And I think he wants a real relationship with you. He just doesn't know how to build one." Leo was quiet for a long moment, absently breaking off pieces of cannoli without eating them. "Do you love him? Really love him? Not just love what he does for you?" "I love him," Rose said with absolute certainty. "I love his intelligence and his passion and the way he sees potential in things other people give up on. I love that he plays piano when he can't sleep and reads poetry in Italian. I love that he's trying to be better, to build something legitimate, to use his power for creation instead of destruction. And yes, I love that he protects me and believes in my dreams, but I'd love him even without all of that, Leo. I'd love him if he was nobody with nothing because of who he is when the world isn't watching. Leo studied her for a long moment, then sighed heavily. I believe you. I hate that I believe you, but I do. You're not using him, and he's not using you. This is real, even though it's completely insane and terrible timing. Does that mean you can forgive us? Rose asked, hardly daring to hope. I'm working on it. Leo finally ate a bite of cannoli, his expression softening slightly. I'm still hurt, and it's still weird, and I don't know if I'll ever be completely okay with my best friend dating my father. But I miss you, Rosie. I miss our friendship. And life's too short to stay angry when someone I love is being threatened by violent assholes with gasoline. Rose felt tears spill over, relief and gratitude overwhelming her careful composure. I miss you too, so much. I've been testing recipes and having nobody to share them with. I've been excited about the restaurant and having nobody to celebrate with. Everything feels incomplete without you. Tell me about it, Leo said, and Rose heard the olive branch in the request. Tell me about your restaurant, about your dream that's finally happening. Rose told him everything, the space, the vision, the menu concepts she'd been developing. Leo listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions, offering suggestions from his own restaurant experience. They talked for 2 hours, falling back into the easy rhythm of friendship with careful avoidance of the Alessandro-shaped elephant in the room. When they finally said goodbye, Leo pulled her into a hug, brief and still somewhat stiff, but real. I need more time before I can deal with seeing you two together, he admitted. And I definitely need time before I can have a conversation with my father about all of this. But we're okay, Rosie. We're going to be okay. Rose held him tight, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne and the comfort of having her friend back. Take all the time you need. I'll be here whenever you're ready. She drove back to Alessandro's apartment in a daze of relief and hope. She found him in his study, working through paperwork with the focused intensity he brought to everything. He looked up when she entered, reading her expression immediately. How did it go? Rose crossed to him, climbing into his lap and wrapping her arms around his neck. We're going to be okay. All three of us. Eventually. Alessandro held her close, his face pressed against her hair. Did he ask about me? Not directly, but he's processing. He'll come to you when he's ready. Rose pulled back to look at him. He needs to hear from you why you are the way you are. Why you built walls so high that your own son couldn't climb them. Why you're opening up to me when you never opened up to him. Alessandro's expression tightened with old pain and complicated regret. I don't know if I can explain in ways he'll understand. Try, Rose urged gently. Try for him. Try for us. Leo needs to know he matters to you, Alessandro. He needs to hear it from you, not through me. What if I've damaged that relationship beyond repair? The vulnerability in Alessandro's voice was raw, real, and achingly honest. What if Leonardo can forgive you but not me? Then we keep trying until he does. Rose kissed him softly. But I think you're underestimating your son. Leo's hurt, but he's not cruel. Give him the truth and trust that he'll know what to do with it. Over the next several weeks, a fragile new normal emerged. Rose threw herself into restaurant renovations, working alongside contractors and designers to transform her empty space into the dream she'd been nurturing for years. Alessandro helped where she'd let him, making calls, negotiating contracts, solving problems with the kind of strategic thinking that came from decades of building empires. Leo remained cautiously present in Rose's life. They had coffee once a week, texted regularly, slowly rebuilding trust and intimacy. But he kept careful distance from Alessandro, deflecting Rose's gentle suggestions that father and son needed to talk, until the day Rose's restaurant passed its final inspection. She called Leo immediately, unable to contain her excitement. We passed. Everything's approved. We open in 2 weeks. Rosie, that's incredible. Leo's genuine joy came through the phone. We need to celebrate. Let me take you to dinner. Actually, Rose said carefully, I was hoping you'd come to a small pre-opening dinner I'm hosting. Just a few people testing the menu, giving feedback. You and... She took a breath. And Alessandro. The silence on the other end was heavy. Leo, please, Rose continued, This is important to me. You're both important to me, and I need you both there for this moment. You're asking me to have dinner with my father, Leo said flatly. I'm asking you to take the first step toward healing your relationship with him, to give him a chance to be there for something that matters, to maybe, possibly, start building something real between you. Another long silence, then Leo sighed heavily. Fine, one dinner, but if it goes badly, you can't say I didn't warn you. Rose felt hope bloom in her chest, bright and terrifying. Thank you. This means everything to me. She told Alessandro that night, watching emotions flicker across his face, hope and fear, and something that looked like desperate longing. He agreed to have dinner with me? With us, Rose corrected. At my restaurant. Next Thursday, 7 o'clock. Just the three of us and my food and a chance to start over. Alessandro pulled her close, his heart racing against her cheek. What if I make it worse? What if I say the wrong thing and damage what you've rebuilt with him? Then we'll survive that too, Rose said firmly. But I don't think you will. I think you'll be honest and vulnerable and show Leo the version of you I get to see every day. And I think he'll finally understand that you're not the emotionally unavailable father he's built up in his head. You're just a man who never learned how to show love without fear. The week leading up to the dinner passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Rose tested menu items obsessively, discarding dishes that weren't perfect, pushing herself to create food that would be worthy of this moment. Alessandro grew quieter, more pensive, and Rose caught him staring at his phone multiple times like he wanted to call Leo but couldn't find the words. Thursday arrived with crisp November air, and Rose's nerves stretched thin enough to snap. She arrived at her restaurant early, prepping ingredients with shaking hands, trying to channel anxiety into creation. The space was beautiful now, exactly what she'd envisioned, with warm lighting and exposed brick, and an open kitchen that invited conversation. Alessandro arrived at 6:30, devastatingly handsome in dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look almost black. He kissed her carefully, mindful of her chef's whites, and Rose tasted his nervousness. Whatever happens tonight, she said firmly, we face it together. No more hiding, no more fear. Just honesty and hope, and the three of us trying to build something real. I love you, Alessandro said quietly. Whatever happens with Leonardo, I need you to know that choosing you was the best decision of my life. Leo arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. He stood in the doorway of Rose's restaurant, taking in the space with an expression Rose couldn't quite read. Then his gaze landed on Alessandro, and the air grew thick with tension and unspoken history. Leo. Alessandro's voice was carefully neutral. Thank you for coming. I'm here for Rose, Leo said, but his tone lacked the hostility from before. Her restaurant. Her dream. Not for you. I know. Alessandro didn't move closer, giving his son space. But I'm grateful anyway. Rose watched them stare at each other. Two men she loved, both stubborn and proud and nursing hurts they didn't know how to heal. She wanted to intervene, to smooth over the awkwardness, but instead she made herself step back and let them navigate this moment on their own terms. The space is incredible, Rosie, Leo finally said, breaking the standoff. You've built something amazing. Rose exhaled relief, moving into familiar territory. Come see the kitchen. I want your opinion on the layout. She gave them the tour, pointing out design choices and equipment selections, slowly easing the tension through shared passion for food and creation. Alessandro followed quietly, letting Rose and Leo talk, but she caught the way his gaze kept drifting to his son, hungry and hopeful and achingly uncertain. They settled at a table near the window, the city glittering beyond the glass. Rose brought out the first course, a delicate autumn squash soup with crispy sage and brown butter, and watched Leo's face transform at the first taste. This is perfect, he said quietly. Rosie, this is absolutely perfect. You helped me develop this recipe, Rose reminded him. Remember? We spent an entire weekend testing sage preparations. Something softened in Leo's expression. I remember, before everything got complicated. It's still that good, Rose said gently. The recipe hasn't changed. We're just eating it in a different context. She brought out course after course, seared scallops with citrus beurre blanc, short ribs braised until they fell apart with the whisper of a fork, Brussels sprouts charred and tossed with pancetta and balsamic. Each dish was a love letter, a conversation, a bridge between past and present. Halfway through the meal, Alessandro finally spoke beyond polite compliments about the food. "You were right to be angry," he said quietly, his gaze fixed on Leo. "I handled everything badly. I should have told you about Rose myself immediately. I should have respected your friendship enough to be honest." Leo's fork stilled halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully, his expression guarded. Alessandro continued, the words seeming to cost him something. "But I need you to understand that falling for Rose wasn't a choice I made to hurt you. It was something that happened despite every logical reason it shouldn't. She makes me want to be better, Leonardo. She makes me remember the man I wanted to be before I became the man I had to be." "And what about being my father?" Leo's voice was steady, but Rose heard the pain underneath. "Did you ever want to be better at that?" The question hung in the air, sharp and honest and demanding truth. Alessandro's jaw tightened, his hands gripping his wine glass hard enough that Rose worried it might shatter. "Every day. I wanted to be the father you deserved every single day of your life, but I didn't know how. My own father taught me that emotions were weaknesses, that showing love made you vulnerable to people who would use it against you. So I gave you everything I knew how to give: security, education, opportunities. But I kept myself separate because I didn't know how to be close without being afraid." Leo stared at his father, something shifting in his expression. "You were afraid? Of what?" "I was your kid, not a business rival." "I was afraid you'd see me clearly and find me lacking," Alessandro admitted, his voice rough. "I was afraid you'd realize your father wasn't the powerful, untouchable figure everyone else saw. That I was just a man who'd built walls so high he couldn't remember how to climb down. And by the time I realized what I'd sacrificed for those walls, you'd already grown up believing I didn't care." Rose watched tears gather in Leo's eyes as years of hurt and misunderstanding began to crack apart. "I never thought you didn't care," Leo said quietly. "I just thought I wasn't enough to make you want to try. That I disappointed you somehow by choosing restaurants over your empire." "Never." Alessandro's certainty was absolute. "You choosing your own path, standing up to me, refusing to become what I wanted instead of what you needed. That took more courage than anything I've ever done. I'm proud of you, Leonardo. I've always been proud of you. I just never learned how to say it in ways that mattered." The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Rose held her breath, watching father and son stare at each other across years of miscommunication and hurt. Then Leo stood up, crossed to where Alessandro sat, and pulled him into a fierce hug. Alessandro made a sound like breaking, his arms coming up to hold his son with desperate strength. Rose watched them cling to each other, both shaking with emotion they'd spent too long suppressing, and felt tears stream down her own face. When they finally pulled apart, both men were visibly crying, all pretense and armor stripped away. "I'm still mad at you," Leo said, his voice thick, "for sneaking around, for lying, for making this so complicated. But I love you, Dad, and I don't want to lose you over this." "You won't," Alessandro said roughly, gripping Leo's shoulders. "I swear to you, Leonardo, you won't lose me. Whatever happens between Rose and me, you and I are forever. You're my son. Nothing changes that." Leo nodded, swiping at his eyes, then turned to Rose. "And you? You're still my best friend, even though you have terrible taste in men." Rose laughed through her tears, crossing to them both. "The absolute worst taste, but I love you both anyway." They stood together in Rose's restaurant, this family they'd broken and rebuilt into something new, and Rose felt something settle in her chest that had been restless for months. This was right, complicated and messy and forged through pain, but fundamentally right. They finished dinner with lighter conversation, the tension that had defined recent weeks dissolving into something that felt almost like peace. Leo and Alessandro talked about the restaurant, about business strategies and menu development, falling into an easy rhythm that spoke of shared intelligence and complementary strengths. When the evening finally ended, Leo hugged them both, Rose first, then Alessandro, in an embrace that lasted longer and meant more than words could convey. "I need time still," Leo admitted as he prepared to leave. "Time to adjust to this new reality. But we're going to be okay. All three of us." After he left, Rose and Alessandro stood in her empty restaurant, wrapped around each other, breathing in the knowledge that they'd survived the hardest test. "Thank you," Alessandro said quietly, for believing we could fix this, for having faith when I had none. Rose tilted her head back to look at him. We're family now, the three of us. Complicated and unconventional, but family. And families fight for each other. Alessandro kissed her then, soft and reverent and full of promise. I'm going to marry you someday, Rose-Lynn. When the time is right and we've built something strong enough to survive anything, I'm going to make you mine in every way that matters. Rose's breath caught, her heart racing with hope and certainty, and love so fierce it scared her. Is that a threat or a promise? Both, Alessandro said with a smile that was all warmth and wicked intent. Always both, tesoro. They locked up her restaurant together, this space that represented dreams achieved and battles won, and drove home through Boston's nighttime streets with hands clasped tight and futures spreading out before them like possibility. Rose's restaurant opened on a cold December evening with snow falling softly outside the windows, and her heart hammering against her ribs with equal parts terror and exhilaration. She'd named it Ember, simple, evocative, representing both the fire of creation and the warmth of gathering together. The name felt right in ways she couldn't fully articulate, like it had always been waiting for her to claim it. The dining room was full of people who mattered. Food critics sat alongside Leo's culinary school friends, Alessandro's business associates mixed with Rose's therapy group members, and at the community table sat a diverse group of strangers who'd responded to her invitation for a complimentary opening night meal. It was exactly the mix Rose had dreamed of: privilege and struggle, wealth and need, all brought together through the universal language of food. Alessandro sat at a corner table with Leo, the two of them talking with an ease that still felt new and precious. Rose caught glimpses of them between plating dishes, Leo's animated gestures as he described something, Alessandro's rare, genuine smile, both of them occasionally glancing toward the kitchen to check on her. The sight made her chest tight with gratitude and love. "Chef, the critics are raving about the short rib," her sous chef Danny reported, the same line cook who'd tried to defend her from Marcus. Rose had hired him the day after signing her lease, building her team with people who understood that kitchens could be sanctuaries instead of battlegrounds. And Table 7 wants to send their compliments. They're asking if they can meet you after service. Rose wiped her hands on her apron, surveying her kitchen with the critical eye of someone who'd spent years dreaming of this moment. Everything was running smoothly, orders flowing, timing precise, her team working together with the synchronized efficiency of people who trusted each other completely. "Tell Table 7 I'll be out after the dessert course," Rose said, already mentally reviewing the final dishes. "And Danny, thank you for everything, for being here, for believing in this place, for having my back when Marcus showed up." Danny's expression softened. "You built something special here, Chef. We're all just grateful to be part of it." The service continued for hours, each course a conversation between Rose and her diners. She designed a menu that told stories, her grandmother's dumpling recipe reimagined with seasonal ingredients, the carbonara technique Leo had taught her elevated with house-cured pancetta, Alessandro's favorite osso buco reinterpreted with modern precision. Every dish carried memory and meaning, transformation and hope. When the last dessert had been plated and delivered, Rose finally allowed herself to step out of the kitchen. The dining room erupted in applause, and she felt heat crawl up her neck, unused to being the center of attention. Alessandro and Leo stood immediately, their pride visible and overwhelming. Rose made her rounds, thanking diners and accepting compliments with the awkward grace of someone still learning to receive praise. The food critics were effusive, already typing notes into their phones. The community table guests thanked her with emotion that brought tears to her eyes, sharing how rare it was to be treated with dignity and generosity instead of charity and pity. "You're not just feeding people," one older woman said, gripping Rose's hand. "You're reminding us we matter, that we deserve beauty and care. That's worth more than the meal, lovely as it was." Rose hugged her, fighting tears, remembering every time Marcus had made her feel small and worthless. This was why she'd survived. This was why the pain had meaning, so she could create spaces where everyone, regardless of money or status, could feel cherished. When she finally made it to Alessandro and Leo's table, they both stood to embrace her. "You did it, Rosie," Leo said, his voice thick with emotion. "You built exactly what you said you would. I'm so proud of you I could burst." The food was extraordinary, Alessandro added, his dark eyes holding hers with intensity that made her breath catch. But watching you command that kitchen, seeing you create with such passion and precision, that was the real masterpiece. Rose wanted to collapse into a chair and process the enormity of what she'd just accomplished. But there was still closing to manage, staff to thank, a kitchen to clean. Alessandro seemed to read her exhaustion. "Go finish your work," he said gently. "Leonardo and I will wait. Then we're taking you home and celebrating properly." Rose returned to her kitchen, working alongside her team to break down stations and prep for tomorrow's service. The work was meditative, familiar, grounding her after hours of adrenaline. When everything was finally clean and organized, when the last team member had been thanked and sent home, Rose stood alone in her kitchen and let herself feel the full weight of achievement. She'd done it. Against every odd, every fear, every voice that said she wasn't ready or capable or strong enough, she'd built her dream. Alessandro and Leo were waiting in the dining room, both of them having somehow acquired champagne and glasses. They looked up when Rose emerged, and the love on both their faces made her want to cry all over again. "To Rose Lynn," Alessandro said, raising his glass, "who turns ingredients into art and strangers into family, who survived darkness and chose to create light, who makes the impossible look effortless." "To my best friend," Leo added, his smile warm and genuine, "who never gave up on her dream or on us, who somehow made this insane situation work, who deserves every success coming her way." They drank, the champagne crisp and celebratory, and Rose felt something settle in her soul that had been restless since the night she'd escaped Marcus. She was safe now, loved now, free to build and create and become whoever she wanted to be. "I need to tell you both something," Rose said, setting down her glass. "I've been keeping a secret." Alessandro's expression sharpened with concern. "What kind of secret?" Rose pulled out her phone, opening an email she'd received 3 days ago and been too superstitious to share until opening night was successfully behind her. The James Beard Foundation wants to feature Ember in their Rising Star Restaurant series. They're sending someone next month to do a full profile. Leo's eyes went wide. "Rosie, that's incredible. Do you know what kind of exposure that brings? What it could mean for your business?" "I know." Rose's hands were shaking slightly, the magnitude of recognition still feeling surreal. "But I also know it's going to bring attention, media, publicity, people digging into my story. They're going to find out about Marcus, about the restraining order, about—" She glanced at Alessandro. "About your family's reputation and our relationship. Everything's going to be public." Alessandro was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he crossed to her, taking her trembling hands in his steady ones. "Let them look," he said firmly. "Let them write whatever they want. You survived abuse and built something beautiful. I'm a man with a complicated past who's trying to build a legitimate legacy. Together, we're proof that people can transform, that love can be messy and real, that families come in all forms. None of that is shameful, Rose. None of it needs to be hidden." "What about your business?" Rose pressed. "Your reputation? If they start investigating, then they'll find a man who spent the last year transitioning his holdings into legitimate enterprises," Alessandro interrupted calmly. "Who's created a foundation to support small business owners from underserved communities? Who's using his resources to build instead of destroy? I'm not afraid of scrutiny anymore, Tesoro. You taught me that transformation is possible when you stop hiding." Leo cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "For what it's worth, I think you should do the profile. Tell your story honestly. People need to hear that abuse survivors can rebuild, that unconventional families work, that love doesn't always look like fairy tales, but it can still be real." Rose looked between the two men she loved most, seeing their certainty and support, and felt the last of her fear dissolve. "Okay, then we do it together. No more secrets, no more hiding, just truth, and whatever comes with it." They celebrated until the early morning hours, the three of them talking and laughing in Rose's restaurant like they had all the time in the world. Leo shared stories about Alessandro's awkward attempts to understand restaurant culture. Alessandro revealed that he'd been secretly taking cooking classes to better appreciate Rose's work. And Rose confessed that she'd been so nervous about opening night she'd stress-baked 17 different versions of bread pudding before settling on the final recipe. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Leo stood to leave, yawning hugely. I'm proud of both of you, he said, pulling Rose and Alessandro into a group hug that would have seemed impossible months ago. For building this, for fighting for each other, for not giving up when I was being stubborn and hurt. You're good together. It took me a while to see it, but you balance each other in ways that make sense. After Leo left, Alessandro pulled Rose into his arms, both of them swaying slightly from exhaustion and champagne. Come home with me, he murmured against her hair. Stay tonight and every night. Stop pretending you don't already live in my apartment half the time. Rose tilted her head back to look at him. Is that your way of asking me to move in? It's my way of acknowledging reality, Alessandro said with a slight smile. Your toothbrush lives in my bathroom. Your clothes take up half my closet. You cook in my kitchen more than I do. We've been living together in everything but name for months, Tesoro. I'm just making it official. Rose knew she should probably think about it, consider the implications, maintain some independence. Instead, she just kissed him and whispered, Okay. Alessandro's arms tightened around her, his relief palpable. Okay? Okay. I'll move in. Okay, we'll build a life together. Okay to all of it, Alessandro. I'm done being careful and afraid. I want to be with you completely. They locked up Ember together, walking out into snow-covered Boston streets with their hands clasped tight and their futures spreading out before them. Rose looked back at her restaurant one more time, the warm light spilling through windows, the sign that bore the name of her dream, and felt gratitude so fierce it took her breath away. This was what she'd survived for. This moment, this love, this life she'd built from the ashes of who she used to be. The months that followed brought changes that felt both inevitable and miraculous. Rose moved into Alessandro's penthouse, her belongings mixing with his until the space became truly theirs. She woke up to him playing piano in the early morning hours, fell asleep to his voice reading Italian poetry, learned the rhythm of loving someone who'd forgotten how to be vulnerable until she'd reminded him it was safe. Ember thrived beyond Rose's wildest projections. The James Beard profile brought exactly the kind of attention she'd anticipated. Food critics raving, customers booking months in advance, and yes, media digging into her background. A Boston magazine ran a feature titled From Abuse Survivor to Rising Star Chef, detailing her journey with Marcus and her relationship with Alessandro. Rose braced for judgment and scandal. Instead, she received an overwhelming response of support. Other abuse survivors reached out, thanking her for speaking openly about trauma and recovery. Young chefs called her an inspiration. Even the attention on Alessandro's past seemed to focus more on his transformation than his questionable history, framing him as a complex figure genuinely trying to build something legitimate. People want redemption stories, Leo observed one afternoon while helping Rose prep for evening service. He'd become a regular presence at Ember, sometimes cooking alongside her, other times just keeping her company during the controlled chaos of restaurant life. They want to believe people can change. You and Dad are proof that they can. Rose glanced at her best friend, seeing the peace in his expression that had taken months to achieve. Are we okay? Really okay? I know you've said it before, but we're okay, Leo interrupted firmly. It's still weird sometimes seeing you two together, but it's also right. You make my father happy in ways I've never seen. And he makes you feel safe and valued and strong. That's what matters, Rosie, not what other people think, not whether it's conventional, just that it's real. The confirmation settled something in Rose's chest that had been waiting for Leo's complete acceptance. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, the friendship they'd rebuilt stronger for having been tested. Alessandro spent his days systematically transforming his business empire, selling off questionable holdings and investing in legitimate enterprises. He created the Valenti Foundation, funding small business loans for entrepreneurs from marginalized communities, with Rose serving as an advisor for food-related ventures. Watching him pour energy into creation instead of control, Rose saw glimpses of the young man who'd wanted to be a pianist, idealistic and passionate beneath decades of protective cynicism. One evening in early spring, 6 months after Ember's opening, Alessandro asked Rose to close the restaurant early. Why? She asked, suspicious of the carefully neutral tone he was using. We have reservations. I can't just... Danny and your team can handle one night, Alessandro interrupted smoothly. Trust me, Tesoro. Close early. Meet me at the restaurant at 8. Rose wanted to argue, but something in Alessandro's expression stopped her. She gave her staff instructions, changed into the dress Alessandro had left hanging in her office, deep emerald silk that reminded her of the gala where everything started, and arrived at Ember at exactly 8 o'clock. The restaurant was transformed. Candles everywhere, rose petals scattered across tables, soft music playing from hidden speakers. And in the center of the dining room stood Alessandro, devastating in a dark suit, holding a single white rose. Rose's breath caught, her heart already racing with anticipation and hope. "What is this?" she managed. Alessandro crossed to her, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "This is me keeping a promise I made 6 months ago, about marrying you when the time was right, and we'd built something strong enough to survive anything." He took her hand, leading her to the center of the room, and Rose realized they weren't alone. Leo stood near the kitchen, his phone out and his expression soft with emotion. Several of Rose's close friends lined the perimeter, people from her therapy group, her restaurant team, the chosen family she'd built after Marcus. Alessandro sank to one knee, pulling a velvet box from his pocket, and Rose forgot how to breathe. "Rose Lynn," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "you walked into my life by accident and changed everything. You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that power can create instead of destroy, that love is worth any risk. You survived darkness and chose to build light. You forgave betrayal and rebuilt broken bridges. You make every day feel like possibility instead of obligation." Tears streamed down Rose's face as Alessandro opened the box, revealing a ring that was both elegant and unique, a deep green emerald surrounded by diamonds that caught candlelight and threw it back in brilliant fragments. "I'm not perfect," Alessandro continued. "I'm complicated and difficult and carry shadows I'll never fully escape. But I love you with everything I am and everything I'm becoming. I want to build a life with you, Rose. I want to wake up to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to support your dreams and celebrate your victories and be there when things get hard. I want to be your partner, your protector, your home." He paused, his hands trembling slightly as he held the ring. "Will you marry me?" Rose dropped to her knees in front of him, framing his face with her hands, seeing past the powerful businessman to the man who played piano when he couldn't sleep and read poetry in Italian and loved her with a fierceness that still took her breath away. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it, Alessandro. To building a life together, to facing whatever comes, to being your home the way you're mine." "Yes." Alessandro's expression cracked, revealing joy so pure it made him look decades younger. He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like promise and forever, and the beginning of something neither of them had dared dream possible. Around them, their chosen family erupted in cheers and applause. Leo appeared first, pulling them both into a fierce hug. "Welcome to the family officially, Rosie," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Though honestly, you've been family since the day you sent my dad that embarrassing text." Rose laughed through her tears, holding both of the Valenti men close. "That was the best mistake I ever made." "Not a mistake," Alessandro corrected, kissing her forehead. "The perfect accident that led us exactly where we needed to be." They celebrated into the early morning hours, Rose's restaurant filled with love and laughter, and the kind of joy that comes from surviving hard things and choosing to build beauty anyway. Danny opened champagne while Rose's friends shared toasts and embarrassing stories. Leo cornered Alessandro for a private conversation that Rose couldn't hear, but that ended with father and son embracing tightly. When everyone finally left and they were alone in the restaurant Rose had built and the life they'd created together, Alessandro pulled her close. "I have something else for you," he said quietly. "A wedding present, though I suppose it's premature since we haven't actually planned the wedding yet." "Alessandro, the ring is... This is different." He handed her a folder, watching her face carefully. "Open it." Rose opened the folder, scanning the legal documents inside with growing confusion and then dawning understanding. It was a foundation charter, the Rose Lynn Culinary Scholarship Fund, endowed with enough money to send dozens of aspiring chefs from underserved communities through culinary school. "You're funding scholarships in my name?" Rose whispered. "I'm funding your legacy," Alessandro corrected. You told me once that everyone deserves to feel cared for, that food is love and connection. This ensures that talented young people who love cooking but can't afford training get the same opportunities you fought so hard for. It's my way of taking the power and resources I built through questionable means and transforming them into something that creates opportunity instead of fear. Rose stared at the documents, then at Alessandro, seeing clearly the transformation they'd both undergone. He'd gone from a man who controlled through intimidation to someone who built through generosity. She'd gone from a woman who made herself invisible to someone who claimed space and created beauty and refused to hide her scars. "We're going to get married," she said, the words feeling both surreal and absolutely right, "and build a life together, and use everything we have to help other people transform the way we did." "Yes," Alessandro agreed, pulling her close. "That's exactly what we're going to do." They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at Ember, surrounded by the people who'd witnessed their journey from accidental text message to chosen family. Rose wore a simple ivory dress and carried white roses, while Alessandro looked devastating in a perfectly tailored suit and actually cried when she walked down the makeshift aisle between restaurant tables. Leo served as best man, his toast making everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. He talked about watching his father transform from a distant figure to a man capable of profound love, about witnessing his best friend rebuild herself into someone strong enough to demand the respect she deserved, about learning that family could be messy and complicated and still fundamentally right. "To Rose and Alessandro," Leo finished, raising his glass, "who proved that love doesn't always look like fairy tales, but it can still be magic. Who showed me that forgiveness is possible and transformation is real. Who built something beautiful out of broken pieces. May your marriage be filled with good food, great wine, and the kind of love that makes all the messy, complicated parts worthwhile." They danced in Rose's restaurant until the early morning hours, Alessandro holding her close while their family celebrated around them. At some point, Leo pulled Rose aside, his expression serious. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Something I've been waiting for the right moment to say." Rose's heart jumped with concern. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. The opposite, actually." Leo's smile was soft, almost shy. "I met someone. At the wedding, actually. One of your chef friends from culinary school. We've been talking all night, and I think this might be something real, Rosie. The kind of real you and my dad have." Rose threw her arms around him, joy and relief and love overwhelming her careful composure. "Leo, that's wonderful. Tell me everything. Who is she? How did you meet? What did you talk about?" They spent the next hour dissecting every detail of Leo's new romance, falling back into their old pattern of best friend confidences. When Alessandro came looking for his bride, he found her and Leo sitting on the floor behind the bar, surrounded by empty champagne bottles and helpless laughter. "What are you two doing?" Alessandro asked, amused and exasperated in equal measure. "Celebrating," Rose managed between giggles. "Leo met someone, possibly the love of his life, at our wedding." Alessandro's expression softened, genuine happiness for his son evident in his eyes. "Then we're celebrating together." He sat down with them, his expensive suit somehow looking perfectly appropriate even on a restaurant floor, and they talked until dawn broke over Boston. 3 people who'd been broken in different ways, who'd hurt each other and forgiven, who'd built something new and strong from the ruins of what they'd been. The years that followed brought changes both expected and surprising. Ember earned its Michelin star 18 months after opening, with Rose becoming the youngest female chef in Boston to receive the honor. The Scholarship Foundation sent its first cohort of students to culinary school, and Rose made it a point to mentor each of them personally. Alessandro fully extricated himself from the questionable elements of his business empire, becoming known more for his philanthropy and legitimate investments than his shadowy past. Leo married his culinary school friend Sarah in a ceremony that somehow managed to be both elegant and chaotic, with Rose catering and Alessandro giving a father-of-the-groom speech that made everyone cry. Watching Alessandro embrace his son, both of them visibly emotional and unashamed of showing it, Rose felt gratitude for every difficult moment that had led them to this place. Marcus remained in prison for the full term of his sentence, and Rose realized with some surprise that she rarely thought about him anymore. He'd taken 2 years of her life, but she'd taken back everything after, reclaimed her power, rebuilt her identity, created a future he couldn't touch. The restraining order remained in place, a legal reminder of boundaries and consequences, but Rose no longer needed it to feel safe. She'd built safety through community, through love, through the knowledge that she was surrounded by people who valued her. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Alessandro surprised Rose with a gift that made her cry all over again, a baby grand piano delivered to their penthouse while she was at the restaurant. "I thought you could learn," he said when she came home and found it. "We could play together, make music instead of just listening to it." Oh, Rose ran her fingers over the keys, hearing potential instead of perfection. "I'll be terrible at first. Then we'll be terrible together." Alessandro sat beside her on the bench, guiding her hands to the proper positions. "We're good at taking broken things and making them beautiful. Why should music be any different?" They spent the evening fumbling through simple pieces, laughing at mistakes, creating something new together. It was imperfect and clumsy, and absolutely right, just like everything else they'd built. Rose thought about the night she'd sent that mortifying text message, standing in a parking garage and wanting to disappear from sheer embarrassment. She'd had no idea that humiliation would lead to this, to love that transformed, to family rebuilt, to a life richer and more complex than any fairy tale. She'd wanted safety and settled for invisible. Then Alessandro had seen her anyway, and everything had changed. They'd hurt people they loved and made mistakes that seemed unforgivable. They'd chosen each other when choosing felt like betrayal. They'd rebuilt trust through honesty and time and the stubborn refusal to give up when things got hard. And somehow, impossibly, they'd created something beautiful. Rose leaned into Alessandro's shoulder, his arm coming around her automatically, and felt the weight of 5 years together. The fights and reconciliations, the triumphs and setbacks, the everyday magic of building a life with someone who saw all your broken pieces and loved you anyway. "What are you thinking?" Alessandro asked softly. Rose smiled, watching their reflections in the piano's glossy surface. Two people who'd found each other through accident and chosen each other through intention. "I'm thinking I should send more embarrassing text messages," she said, "since the last one worked out so well." Alessandro's laugh was warm and genuine, the sound of a man who'd learned to be happy. "I think one was sufficient, Tesoro. But if you do send another, make sure it's to the right person this time." "It was the right person," Rose corrected, tilting her head back to kiss him. "It was always the right person, I just didn't know it yet." They sat together at the piano as evening fell over Boston, making imperfect music and perfect memories, building a life that looked nothing like the fairy tales Rose had once imagined but felt infinitely more real. Because real love wasn't safe or simple or easy. Real love was choosing someone every day, despite complications and consequences. Real love was forgiving betrayals and rebuilding trust, and believing transformation was possible even when evidence suggested otherwise. Real love was an accidental text message that changed everything, and Rose wouldn't change a single moment of it. Not the fear, not the pain, not the impossible choices or the people they'd hurt along the way, because all of it, every messy, complicated, beautiful moment, had led them exactly here, to this life they'd built together, to this family they'd chosen, to this love that had survived everything and emerged stronger for the surviving. Rosalind had spent 2 years learning to be invisible, but Alessandro Valenti had taught her to be seen, and in being seen, truly, completely, with all her scars and strength, Rose had finally learned to see herself, not as a victim or a survivor, but as a woman who'd taken every broken piece of her past and built something extraordinary. A woman who'd chosen love over fear. A woman who'd claimed her power and used it to create beauty. A woman who'd sent an embarrassing text message to the wrong person and received her whole future in return. That was a story worth telling, and Rose spent the rest of her life proving it was true.